Long before the pyramids of Egypt, the columns of Greece, or the roads of Rome, the first civilization emerged in a land between two rivers. This region, known as Mesopotamia, meaning between the rivers, in ancient Greek, lay between the Tigris and Euphrates. These rivers, which flowed from the mountains of eastern Turkey to the Persian Gulf, created rich, fertile plains in what is now modern-day Iraq. On these plains, humanity began to form cities, develop writing, create laws, and explore the mysteries of the cosmos. The very foundations of urban life grew from this fertile ground, setting the stage for the birth of civilization. This journey spans from 10,000 BC, when the first settlements appeared after the Ice Age, to 5309 BC, when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon. Throughout this time, kings built mighty empires from mud, brick, and bronze, while scribes etched wedge-shaped symbols into clay tablets. Architects constructed towering ziggurats to reach the gods. Despite their humble nature, these clay records have outlasted many grander monuments, preserving the achievements of a long-forgotten world. The legacy of this ancient civilization remains, not in the grandiosity of stone, but in the lasting marks on clay that continue to tell the stories of our distant ancestors. The dawn of civilization began in the Fertile Crescent, as the ice sheets receded and humans laid the foundations of organized society. With the retreat of the last ice age around the 10th millennium BC, the climate of Southwest Asia began to warm. The icy grasp that had long constrained human development gradually loosened, allowing new possibilities to emerge. In the hills and valleys surrounding the twin rivers, small bands of hunter-gatherers made a remarkable discovery: wild wheat and barley growing abundantly. These early peoples had spent countless generations following migrating herds and gathering seasonal plants. They carried their possessions on their backs and moved with the rhythms of nature. However, in this changing world, they began to settle in areas where food was more plentiful. The first settlements were humble, clusters of round huts constructed from reeds and mud, at archaeological sites like Tel Moribet and Abu Huraira. In what is now northern Syria, evidence reveals that people began to establish permanent homes, marking the beginning of a new chapter in human history. They still hunted gazelles and gathered wild pistachios, yet they remained in one place, season after season. In the Jordan Valley, a settlement emerged that would become something unprecedented. Jericho, possibly the world's oldest continuously inhabited city, rose 11,000 years ago. Its inhabitants built stone walls not just for shelter but for defense, marking the first evidence of communal protection. They also constructed mysterious tower-like structures, whose purpose still sparks debate among archaeologists today. Further to the east, in Anatolia, another remarkable community flourished. At a site known as Chatel Hoyuk, people built their mud brick homes so tightly together that no streets existed between them. Residents entered their homes through holes in the roof, moving through the settlement like ants navigating a complex mound. But the true revolution was unfolding quietly in the fields. Through careful observation and selection, these early farmers began to domesticate wild grains, altering the course of human history in ways that would shape civilizations to come. Plants with larger seeds and tougher husks that didn't easily shatter became the preferred choice. Over generations, wild grasses gradually evolved into cultivated wheat. This marked the beginning of deliberate food production. Similarly, animals that were once hunted began to be herded. The wild ox, the fierce ancestors of modern cattle, was slowly domesticated. Soon, sheep, goats, and pigs followed suit. The domestication of animals offered a dependable supply of meat, milk, and hides, eliminating the uncertainties of hunting. This agricultural revolution spread slowly along the Fertile Crescent, a region that stretched from the Persian Gulf, through river valleys and around the Mediterranean coast. The transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded over many centuries. The impact was profound. For the first time in history, humans could produce more food than they immediately needed. This surplus of crops enabled some individuals to shift focus from food production to other pursuits. As a result, societies began to evolve in new ways, laying the foundation for the rise of civilizations. Specialists began to emerge: potters, weavers, and tool makers. who traded their creations for food. During the 6th millennium BC, a crucial innovation emerged: pottery. For millennia, simple containers had been made from stone, wood, and woven reeds. However, the firing of clay created vessels that were not only lightweight but also watertight. This development allowed food to be stored for longer periods, and liquids to be transported with ease. As agriculture grew more productive, early farming communities faced a new challenge. In the lowland plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, rainfall was scarce. However, the annual flooding of these rivers provided rich silt ideal for farming. The people learned to dig channels to direct this water to their fields, marking the birth of irrigation and agriculture. By the early 5th millennium BC, small villages had evolved into larger settlements across the southern alluvial plain. This region, later known as Sumer, would become the cradle of one of the world's earliest civilizations. Sites like Erede and Uruk started as humble farming communities, but over time, they evolved into true cities. Central to this transformation was the management of water. Coordinating irrigation systems demanded leadership and organization that extended far beyond the traditional family unit. The construction of canals and dikes became a communal effort, fostering more complex social structures. As agriculture expanded, new challenges emerged. Surpluses of food had to be protected from raiders and carefully managed during lean seasons. Religious beliefs also evolved in response to the uncertainties of farming life. The forces of rain, flood, and drought were personified as deities, requiring reverence and offerings. Temples, which began as simple shrines, grew more intricate and grand. Almost 6,000 years ago, certain communities began constructing dedicated buildings where early priests performed rituals aimed at ensuring bountiful harvests. These temples became more than just places of worship. They turned into centers of redistribution. Grain was collected and distributed, reinforcing their role as vital hubs in the growing urban landscape. Social stratification grew more pronounced. Those who controlled the surplus of resources seized power, while those who interpreted the will of the gods gained authority. The earlier egalitarianism of hunter-gatherer bands gradually gave way to hierarchical societies with emerging elites. Meanwhile, tools evolved in complexity. Around 7000 BC, copper, initially used for beads and decorative items, began to be shaped into more functional implements. By 6000 BC, metal workers discovered that combining copper with tin produced bronze, harder, more durable, and ideal for new tools and weapons. The Bronze Age had dawned. Trade networks flourished during this period. Obsidian, mined from Anatolian volcanoes, was highly sought after for its sharp edges and traveled vast distances from its origin. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan made its way into ornaments across the southern plains, while shells from the Persian Gulf were found in inland settlements. Towards the end of the 4th millennium BC, in the city of Uruk, a significant new development occurred, marking a pivotal moment in history. Faced with the increasing complexity of managing temple resources, administrators began using clay tokens as a way to represent quantities of goods. These simple tokens eventually evolved into marks pressed into clay tablets, giving birth to the world's first writing system. At first, these marks were basic pictographs, drawings that directly represented the items being counted. For example, a picture of a sheep symbolized a sheep, and multiple marks indicated multiple sheep. Over time, however, the system became more abstract. Marks started to represent not just physical objects, but also sounds, marking the true beginning of written language. By the dawn of the 4th millennium BC, the foundations of modern civilization were being laid. Cities with thousands of inhabitants began to thrive. Specialized crafts and professions emerged. Monumental architecture was constructed, and complex religious institutions took shape. Social stratification and long-distance trade flourished, and written records began to capture it all. This set the stage for the rise of the Sumerians, ushering in the world's first true urban civilization, and the next great chapter in human history. The southern alluvial plain, where the twin rivers meet the sea, became the cradle of humanity's first true civilization. In this fertile land, between marshy deltas and abundant fields, a remarkable culture flourished, giving birth to a network of real cities, each housing thousands within its mud brick walls. Uruk, perhaps the most magnificent of these early urban centers, grew rapidly after 3500 BC. Archaeological excavations have uncovered a settlement that eventually spanned nearly 250 hectares and may have supported a population of up to 50,000 at its peak. Massive defensive walls encircled neighborhoods, filled with tightly packed houses, workshops, marketplaces, and administrative buildings. At the center of Uruk stood its most impressive architectural feat, the White Temple, perched atop a towering platform. This sacred structure rose like a beacon, symbolizing both divine and civic power. The platform, an early precursor to what would later evolve into the classic ziggurat, demonstrated an advanced understanding of engineering and a deep devotion to religious practices. This monumental achievement in architecture reflected the civilization's engineering capabilities and their reverence for the gods, marking a key moment in the development of urban society. Other urban centers began to emerge across the landscape. Urda, once situated along the ancient coastline, but now positioned far inland due to millennia of silt deposition, grew into a thriving port city. Eridu, regarded by local tradition as the oldest city, was home to a grand temple complex dedicated to Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water. Meanwhile, cities like Lagash, Kish, Nippur, and Umma blossomed into powerful city-states, each with its unique identity, ruling dynasty, and patron deity. These cities were not just large villages. They marked the dawn of a new era in human organization. They were home to a wide range of specialists, not only farmers but also metal workers, potters, weavers, merchants, administrators, soldiers, and priests. The evolution of these cities marked a shift in social complexity. Architecture reflected this transformation, with imposing temples, administrative buildings, grand houses for the elite, and more modest quarters for commoners. Each structure told the story of a society evolving from simple settlements into highly organized urban hubs. The rise of monumental architecture reshaped the landscape, transforming not just the physical environment, but also the social and cultural fabric of the region. Temples gradually evolved from simple shrines into grand, multi-room complexes, built atop vast, elevated platforms. These early ziggurats, while not yet resembling the stepped pyramids of later periods, still commanded attention, dominating the surrounding landscape. By 3000 BC, the city of Eri boasted a temple platform rising over 11 meters high, constructed with more than 720,000 baked bricks. The question of who was responsible for these monumental building projects points to a key development in this society: the emergence of institutionalized leadership. Early forms of governance seem to have been based on a shared authority system, where councils of elders and citizen assemblies wielded considerable power. However, over time, religious leaders who controlled the temple's vast resources began to accumulate more authority. These figures, known as priest-kings or in the local tongue, gradually became the central figures of governance. Their authority stemmed not just from political power, but from their perceived special connection to the gods. These early rulers found legitimacy through their role as intermediaries between the divine and human realms. They served as vital bridges, channeling the will of the gods to the people and consolidating their rule through religious and political influence. In times of crisis, whether war, floods, or drought, a temporary military leader might be appointed. These leaders, referred to as big men in the local tongue, were often granted emergency power. In some cases, they used this authority to secure permanent rule, gradually replacing the power of the priests. By 2900 BC, kingship had become a firmly established institution in most cities across the region. Although these kings claimed divine approval, they had not yet reached the status of gods themselves. Royal tombs from this era, particularly those discovered at Hera, reveal immense wealth. Artifacts, such as gold vessels, intricate jewelry, musical instruments, and the skeletal remains of retainers, presumably sacrificed to accompany their ruler into the afterlife, highlight the opulence of the time. Religious beliefs were deeply woven into every aspect of life in these early city-states. The pantheon of deities was vast, with each city elevating its patron god or goddess to a position of prominence. Among the most powerful were Enlil, the god of wind and storms, Enki, the god of water and wisdom, and Inanna, the goddess of love and war. These deities not only shaped the religious life, but also influenced the daily lives of the people who regarded their gods as active participants in their world. The people believed that their gods, while far more powerful, shared many emotions and needs with humans. Temples were seen as the earthly homes of these deities, where priests conducted elaborate rituals to honor them. Daily offerings of food, drink, and incense were made to sustain the gods, who, if neglected, could unleash disasters such as floods, famine, or invasions upon their worshippers. The cosmos was envisioned as a flat disk, with the earth at its center and a vault of heaven covering it. Beneath this, the underworld existed as a shadowy, gloomy realm, where the spirits of the dead lived in a perpetual half-life. Unlike later civilizations, there was no promise of paradise for the virtuous. The afterlife was a continuation of mortal existence, albeit dimmer and less vibrant. In this worldview, the understanding of the natural world was a blend of practical observation and mythological explanation. Medical texts from this time demonstrate an advanced knowledge of anatomy and treatment methods. Yet diseases were often attributed to divine displeasure or demonic influence. Similarly, advanced astronomy not only tracked celestial movements to guide agricultural and religious calendars, but also interpreted unusual cosmic events as divine omens. This understanding of the stars and planets had deep cultural significance, influencing decisions and rituals in daily life. One of the most impactful innovations from this period was the development of uniform writing, which evolved significantly over time. What began as basic pictograms used for accounting gradually transformed into a sophisticated writing system. This new form of communication was capable of expressing abstract concepts and accurately recording spoken language. By 2500 BC, scribes were utilizing around 600 distinct signs, allowing them to record not just inventories of goods, but also letters, legal documents, medical texts, and even literature. This growth of written language marked a significant leap in the way societies preserved and transmitted knowledge. However, literacy was still a privilege reserved for a specialized class of scribes. Boys from wealthy families typically started their education around the age of 7 in tablet houses, where they spent years mastering the intricate writing system. These scribes enjoyed considerable social status, often serving as administrators, accountants, and record keepers for temples, palaces, and merchants. The language of this ancient civilization remains shrouded in mystery. Unlike the Semitic or Indo-European language families, it is a linguistic isolate with no known relatives. Its unique grammar and phonetic system were later preserved in cuneiform, when subsequent cultures adapted the script for their own languages. Thousands of clay tablets have preserved a wealth of literature, offering a glimpse into a rich and vibrant cultural tradition. One of the most famous works, the Epic of Gilgamesh, although compiled into its well-known form in a later period, originated from stories about a historical king of Uruk, who reigned around 20. This epic traces the king's quest for immortality after the death of his beloved companion, ultimately concluding that death is an inescapable part of human existence. In addition to the Epic of Gilgamesh, other significant texts include creation myths, which explain how the gods crafted humans from clay to serve them, hymns to deities and kings, as well as wisdom literature offering both practical guidance and moral teachings, further illuminate the beliefs and values of this ancient culture. One poignant text, Man and His God, grapples with the issue of undeserved suffering, echoing themes from the later biblical book of Job. This ancient civilization also pioneered some of the earliest known legal systems, though the famous Code of Hammurabi would emerge much later. Fragments of legal texts dating back to around 2400 BC reveal a society already focused on formalizing laws surrounding commerce, property, marriage, and criminal justice. One significant set of laws, the laws of Ur-Nammu, introduced monetary compensation for injuries instead of the principle of physical retribution. This concept of monetary reparation would later influence the eye for an eye principle found in subsequent Semitic law codes. Economic life in these early cities was deeply tied to the temples and palaces, which controlled vast agricultural estates. These temples employed thousands of workers to cultivate the land, manage livestock, and produce textiles. Such institutions also developed advanced accounting systems, which meticulously tracked income, expenditures, loans, and interest payments. These early bureaucratic innovations laid the foundation for complex economic systems that would shape future societies. Private commerce thrived as merchant families embarked on trade expeditions to distant lands. They exchanged grain, textiles, and manufactured goods for timber, metals, and luxury items. By the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, trade networks expanded to the Indus Valley Civilization, modern-day Pakistan, the highlands of Iran and Afghanistan, Anatolia, and the shores of the Persian Gulf. Technological advancements flourished during this time. The invention of the potter's wheel around 3500 BC revolutionized ceramic production, while the introduction of wheeled vehicles around 3200 BC transformed transportation. Bronze metallurgy saw significant progress, producing stronger tools and weapons. Mathematical knowledge also grew, with the development of a sexagesimal number system based on units of 60, whose legacy continues in our 60-minute hours and 360-degree circles. Although the urban revolution reshaped society, the majority of people remained farmers, living in rural areas or near the protective walls of cities. The rise of urban centers did not fully displace the agricultural way of life, which continued to be the backbone of the economy. These innovations and trade networks were pivotal in shaping the development of early civilizations, bridging distant cultures and fostering an exchange of knowledge, goods, and ideas that would lay the foundation for future advancements. Their agricultural techniques became increasingly advanced. They invented specialized plows, designed complex irrigation systems with regulatory gates and levees, and developed methods to combat the growing salinization of over-irrigated fields. This allowed their agricultural output to meet the demands of an expanding population. As cities grew, the social hierarchy became more intricate. At the top were the kings, priests, and nobles who wielded significant power. Below them were the professionals, scribes, merchants, and skilled craftsmen. The majority of the urban population consisted of ordinary workers, laborers, and servants, with slaves at the very bottom of the social ladder. While slavery wasn't as widespread as in some later civilizations, it often arose from debt or wartime captivity, and was generally a barterable status. Women in this society enjoyed more rights compared to those in many later civilizations. They could own property, run businesses, and even hold roles as scribes or priestesses. However, the highest religious and political positions were still predominantly held by men. Overall, this society was marked by a clear social structure, with distinct roles and a complex system of labor and governance. Yet it also allowed for some mobility and a degree of independence for women that would later diminish in other cultures. Marriage in ancient Mesopotamia was typically arranged by families, with a bride price being paid to the woman's parents. While divorce was possible for both partners under certain circumstances, men generally had more freedom in initiating it. The city-states of this region were often in a state of intense rivalry and conflict, with disputes over water rights, boundary lines, and trade routes frequently escalating into warfare. Around 2500 BC, the ruler of Ur-Lugazaj successfully conquered several neighboring cities, briefly unifying much of the southern plain. However, his reign was short-lived, and by 2034 BC, the region faced the threat of external conquest. This period marked a significant shift, as the political landscape of Mesopotamia stood on the brink of transformation. The independent city-states had developed a rich culture, advanced technology, and complex social structures, but their constant internal rivalries made them vulnerable. Meanwhile, to the north, near the area of modern-day Baghdad, a leader with extraordinary ambition began to rise to power. His ascent would ultimately change the course of Mesopotamian history, the saga of a civilization that would shape the world. The Sumerians marked the birth of the first true empire. Their legacy is embedded in the imperial systems that followed, influencing successive civilizations in profound ways. The cultural impact of Sumer stretched far beyond its political boundaries, with their religious ideas, literary traditions, artistic expressions, and scientific knowledge continuing to resonate through the ages. Even after the fall of their political power, Sumer's cultural influence remained a guiding force in the development of Mesopotamian civilization for millennia. To the north of the ancient Sumerian city-states, another culture was flourishing in the central plains of Mesopotamia. This people spoke a Semitic language, quite distinct from the isolated tongue of their southern neighbors. Though they were heavily influenced by Sumerian advancements, they maintained a unique identity, focused around their central settlement, Akkad. The exact location of Akkad has eluded modern archaeologists, though it is believed to have been situated somewhere near what is now Baghdad. From this city, a figure would emerge whose ambitions would reshape the political landscape of the ancient world. Sargon, whose name means the true king in his native tongue. The origins of Sargon remain shrouded in mystery. According to his own inscriptions, he was born into humble circumstances, the son of a gardener or date palm cultivator. Another tradition claims he was a foundling, cast adrift in a reed basket on the Euphrates River, a tale latent of the biblical story of Moses. Whatever his true origins, Sargon began his rise as a cup-bearer to the king of Kish, an influential northern city-state. From this modest position, Sargon displayed exceptional political and military acumen. Around 2334 BC, he seized power in Kish, though the exact details of how this occurred have been lost to history. With his base of power secured, Sargon set his sights southward, toward the rich and prosperous cities of the southern plain. His ambition and tactical brilliance soon began to stir the ancient world. Lugal-Laza, Jesse, the ruler of Umma, had briefly managed to unite several southern cities under his control, emerging as the chief rival to Sargon. However, their conflict was not merely a power struggle between two ambitious leaders. It symbolized a clash of ideologies regarding the structure of governance. Lugal-Laza Jesse adhered to the traditional city-state model, aiming to maintain his position as the supreme ruler over each city. In contrast, Sargon sought a more revolutionary vision, the creation of a unified territorial state governed directly from the center. In a series of military campaigns, Sargon decisively defeated Lugal-Laza Jesse and his allies, with the victorious northern forces advancing all the way to the Persian Gulf. This victory marked the beginning of a significant transformation. Sargon, in the aftermath of his triumph, instituted sweeping reforms that radically altered the region's political landscape. Rather than allowing conquered cities to retain their autonomy, as had been the tradition where local dynasties would rule in exchange for tribute, Sargon took a bold step. He removed the existing rulers of these cities and replaced them with loyal officials, many of whom were members of his own family. This move ensured direct central control over the newly incorporated territories, cementing Sargon's authority over a unified state. This administrative innovation heralded the creation of the world's first true empire, an expansive, multi-ethnic state with centralized authority. Spanning a vast territory, the empire reached its zenith, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. It encompassed not only Mesopotamia but also parts of modern-day Syria, Turkey, and Iran. To unify this diverse realm, Sargon implemented several key strategies. He declared his native language the official tongue of the empire, ensuring consistency across its vast domains. Additionally, he standardized weights and measures, streamlining trade and taxation, which were vital to the functioning of the empire. Perhaps most crucially, Sargon established a standing professional army, famously consisting of 5,400 soldiers, who ate bread daily in his presence. This army was fiercely loyal to the ruler, not to local cities or regional leaders, providing the strength needed to maintain centralized control and enforce the empire's policies. The empire's economic strength rested on the surplus of agricultural production collected as taxes, as well as control over vital trade routes. The wealth of conquered cities further enriched the empire, solidifying its power and influence over the region. Trade expanded dramatically under the protection of imperial security. With caravans and ships transporting goods over unprecedented distances, merchants from the empire ventured as far as the Indus Valley, in modern-day Pakistan, and into Central Asia, seeking precious materials such as lapis lazuli, carnelian, and tin. This surge in trade not only linked distant lands but also created an exchange of cultures and ideas. For the common people, the imperial system had both its advantages and challenges. The peace and stability fostered by the empire encouraged commerce and cultural interactions. In some regions, new irrigation projects significantly boosted agricultural productivity. However, the heavy taxation burdened many, and labor could be conscripted for large-scale construction or military campaigns. Rebellions were met with severe punishment. Cities were often destroyed, their walls torn down, and entire populations were sometimes relocated as a form of suppression. These harsh measures reinforced the empire's dominance and control. Sargon's reign lasted for about 56 years according to later king lists, though this may include the reigns of some of his successors. His long rule provided the stability necessary for the empire's institutions to firmly establish themselves. When he passed away around 2279 BC, Sargon left behind a dramatically altered political landscape. The era of independent city-states had shifted to the rise of empires. His successors faced the enduring struggle of imperial rulers, the challenge of maintaining control over vast and diverse territories, each with its own language, culture, and local interests. Sargon's sons, Rimush and Manushtushu, spent much of their reigns quelling revolts. Both met violent ends, likely assassinated after relatively brief rule. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, proved to be the most skilled ruler in the dynasty after the founder himself. Ascending to the throne around 2254 BC, Naram-Sin refined the imperial administration and launched ambitious military campaigns. Faced with a massive rebellion involving several major cities, he demonstrated both strategic brilliance and brutal decisiveness, defeating the opposition and restoring his grandfather's empire. After these military victories, Naram-Sin took a groundbreaking step in Mesopotamian politics, cementing his place as one of the most formidable rulers in the region's history. He declared himself a god. While earlier rulers had claimed divine appointment or ruled on behalf of the gods, Naram-Sin took this a step further. His name was inscribed with the horned crown, a symbol traditionally reserved for deities. This bold move not only emphasized the unparalleled power of the imperial throne, but may have also served as a strategic effort to unify and secure loyalty in a multi-ethnic empire, where local religious customs often diverged. Naram-Sin's reign marked the peak of imperial power. His famous victory, Stil, discovered in Susa, modern-day Iran, portrays him as a towering figure, larger than life, trampling his defeated enemies beneath his feet. The imagery from this period, with rulers depicted as superhuman in both size and accomplishment, set the standard for royal depictions across the ancient Near East for centuries to come. However, despite the grandeur of Naram-Sin's reign, cracks were beginning to show in the empire's foundation. Managing such vast territories, with the limited transportation and communication technology of the time, was proving increasingly difficult. The vastness of the empire, once a symbol of strength, was becoming a challenge to sustain. Naram-Sin's achievements were monumental, but they also highlighted the inherent fragility of empires. As his reign unfolded, the very expanse that marked his power also began to reveal the complexities of holding such a sprawling realm together. Provincial governors, often members of the royal family, gradually built their own power bases. The ongoing costs of military campaigns to quell rebellions placed a significant strain on the economy. Meanwhile, external pressures intensified. Inscriptions from Naram-Sin's reign refer to conflicts with mountain peoples known as the Guti, who conducted raids from the Zagros Mountains to the east. To the northwest, the rising power of Ebla in Syria posed another serious challenge to imperial control. After Naram-Sin's death around 2218 BC, his son, Shah-Kalashari, inherited these escalating issues. Despite being a capable ruler who managed to preserve imperial power for a time, the forces pulling the empire apart proved too powerful. Provincial regions began to break away, external enemies intensified their pressure, and economic problems deepened. A later text poignantly captures these turbulent times, describing the chaos. Who was king? Who was not king? reflecting a period of contested succession and fragmented authority. This phrase paints a vivid picture of the instability and fragmentation that marked the empire's decline. This period of turmoil continued until around 2054 BC, when the last ruler of the dynasty was overthrown, marking the collapse of the empire. Traditional Mesopotamian historians believe that the fall was a divine punishment for Naram-Sin's arrogance, particularly his sacking of the sacred city of Nepal. However, modern scholars point to more tangible causes. The collapse was likely driven by a combination of factors: the environmental strain caused by intensive agricultural practices, the difficulty of governing vast territories, economic challenges, and the relentless pressure from surrounding peoples. These issues collectively weakened the empire's ability to maintain control and stability. Following the empire's fall, several successor states emerged in the region. In the south, local rulers regained their autonomy and reasserted their influence. Meanwhile, in the north, the Guti, a group of mountain people from the Zagros range, took control of parts of the once thriving imperial heartland. Although the empire crumbled, its cultural legacy endured long after its political structures faded. The blending of northern and southern traditions led to the development of a unique Mesopotamian culture, one that would continue to shape the region for centuries to come. The ideal of empire, a unified state under a single ruler, became a recurring aspiration for ambitious leaders throughout history. The enduring prestige of Sargon's dynasty remains so influential that even nearly 2,000 years later, Assyrian kings would claim ties to this first great empire to legitimize their own rule. Despite its decline, the achievements of this pioneering empire left an indelible mark on history, influencing the course of future civilizations. The organizational innovations, cultural exchanges, and political concepts developed during this era became models for empires to follow, not just in Mesopotamia, but across the ancient world. Although the empire itself was relatively short-lived, lasting less than 2 centuries, its legacy would echo for millennia, serving as a template for future imperial states. After the collapse of the world's first empire, the lands between the rivers descended into a period of fragmentation. The mountain-dwelling Guti seized control of the northern territories, while the city-states in the south regained independence under local rulers. This chaotic era would set the stage for the shifting dynamics of power in the centuries to come. Though the empire had crumbled, its cultural and political innovations continued to resonate, shaping the future of empires that followed. The memory of Sargon's great state, and the models it provided, lived on in the ambitions of rulers for generations. This period of disunity stretched on for nearly a century. The Guti, often depicted in contemporary texts as the dragon of the mountains, a people without restraints, held tenuous control over the northern regions. However, they never succeeded in establishing complex administrative systems. Their rule was marked by sporadic raids and tribute collection, rather than organized governance, which led to increasing dissatisfaction among the settled populations under their sway. Meanwhile, to the south, a remarkable cultural renaissance began to emerge, free from northern dominance, yet drawing upon the integrated traditions of the previous era. The ancient cities entered a period of creative revival. This era, known as the Neo-Sumerian period, saw a reinvigoration of older cultural practices, reinterpreted within new political frameworks. Among the revitalized southern centers, the city of Lagash rose to particular prominence under the leadership of a ruler named Guderia. Despite this, Guderia never sought to establish a vast territorial empire. Instead, his leadership focused on cultivating the cultural and economic strength of Lagash, without the need for military expansion. In this way, while the north remained mired in instability, the south flourished with new intellectual and artistic achievements, marking a significant chapter in the region's history. Guderia oversaw a vibrant period of cultural growth, marked by advancements in the arts, architecture, and religious expression. Numerous statues of this devout leader have survived, capturing him in moments of deep reverence, hands clasped in prayer. Crafted from durable diorite stone, imported from faraway lands, these sculptures reflect both the artistic sophistication of the era and the extensive trade networks of the time. Inscriptions left by Guderia offer a glimpse into his religious and architectural ambitions, documenting grand temple-building projects driven by his unwavering devotion. One particularly notable text recounts a vivid dream in which the god Ningirsu appeared to him, providing detailed instructions to rebuild a temple according to divine specifications. This account stands as one of the most significant religious texts of the period, offering rare insight into the intersection of divine inspiration and architectural design. While Lagash thrived culturally under Guderia's rule, a new city was soon to rise as the political heart of the region. An ancient settlement established by the ruler Unamo around 212 BC would eventually emerge as the center of a renewed territorial state. This capable leader expelled the Guti from the north and managed to reunite much of the former imperial territory, albeit on a somewhat smaller scale. Unlike previous empire builders who focused on military conquest and centralization through force, Unamo built his reputation primarily as a lawgiver and a builder. The law code that bears his name, although only partially preserved, is the earliest known systematic legal collection in history, predating the more famous Code of Hammurabi by over 3 centuries. This pioneering legal text introduced fixed monetary penalties for various offenses, shifting away from physical retribution towards standardized compensation. It notably offered protection to the vulnerable widows, orphans, and the poor, shielding them from exploitation by the wealthy. In addition to his legal reforms, Unamo also initiated an ambitious building program across his domains. His constructions, which included temples and administrative buildings, reflected his vision for a prosperous and well-governed state. His contributions left a lasting impact on the infrastructure and governance of his empire. Furthermore, the law code included the earliest known traffic laws, setting forth right-of-way rules for boats navigating the canals, an important development for trade and daily life in the region. Through his legal and infrastructural achievements, Unamo cemented his legacy as a ruler focused on justice and civic development. His most notable achievement was the construction of monumental ziggurats, massive step temples that soared toward the heavens. The best preserved example, located at featured 3 distinct levels, reaching a height of approximately 30 meters, accessible via triple staircases. These colossal structures, visible for miles across the flat landscape, symbolized a powerful resurgence in both cultural pride and religious devotion. The administrative system that flourished during this period represented a refined balance of centralized authority and local governance. Provincial governors were tasked with overseeing regional matters, while a sophisticated bureaucracy was responsible for the collection and redistribution of resources. Royal officials regularly conducted inspections, and messengers ensured the flow of communication along designated routes connecting administrative centers. Under the reign of Namu's son, Shulgi, who ruled for an impressive 48 years, the state reached its zenith in terms of organization and prosperity. The lasting impact of this period shaped the future of Mesopotamian governance, with the state functioning at its most efficient and most prosperous level. This long-reigning monarch introduced a series of groundbreaking reforms that reinforced central governance while honoring local traditions. He standardized the calendar, overhauled the system of weights and measures, and set up a royal messenger network with posting stations. Additionally, Shulgi reorganized the tax system and established a uniform standard for scribal education. Beyond administrative changes, Shulgi worked to shape his image as the ideal ruler through symbolic acts. He famously claimed to be an exceptional runner, capable of personally delivering ritual offerings between major temple cities in a single day, covering a distance of more than 100 miles. Whether literal or symbolic, this assertion emphasized his personal role in connecting distant regions and unifying the realm. In the later years of his reign, Shulgi followed the tradition of previous rulers by declaring himself divine. Temples dedicated to his cult were erected throughout the kingdom, and his name was inscribed with the divine determinative, further solidifying his godlike status. Through these reforms and symbolic gestures, Shulgi not only strengthened the state's structure, but also cultivated a lasting legacy of divine authority and centralized power. The deification of the living king aimed to establish a religious foundation that could unify traditionally independent cities under a single political structure. This move was not just about spiritual authority. It was deeply intertwined with the political strategy of consolidating power across the region. Economically, the period blended centralized planning with elements of the market. The state controlled extensive agricultural estates, employing thousands of workers directly. It also managed vast redistribution networks. Meanwhile, textile workshops, often staffed by hundreds of female workers, produced goods both for local consumption and for export. Private merchants, although largely independent, conducted trade ventures, typically under the watchful eye of the royal authority. Culturally, this era saw a revival of the ancient language, primarily for religious and literary purposes. Scribes played a crucial role, not only preserving but also expanding upon traditional texts. Scribal schools thrived, ensuring that important works were passed down and enriched. Many of the literary masterpieces later recognized as classics, such as creation myths, temple hymns, royal praise poems, and wisdom literature, were compiled and standardized during this time of cultural renaissance. One innovative literary form that emerged was the royal love song, a genre of lyrical compositions that depicted the romantic relationships between kings and the goddess. Inanna, these poems blended politics with eroticism, reinforcing the divine authority of the monarch through metaphors of sacred marriage. For example, a hymn dedicated to Shulgi portrays him as the beloved husband of Inanna, symbolically intertwining political power with cosmic order. During this period, international relations were shaped by both diplomacy and military action. Royal marriages played a crucial role in cementing alliances with neighboring kingdoms, while expansive trade networks reached far-flung regions. Luxury goods flowed from distant lands such as the Indus Valley and Afghanistan, enriching the economy. Military campaigns were launched to secure both borders and vital trade routes, especially against nomadic peoples from the eastern highlands and deserts, who posed periodic threats to the settled regions. Despite Shulgi's numerous successes, the stability of this golden age gradually began to falter. His reign, marked by military conquests and a flourishing economy, laid the groundwork for a period of prosperity, but also sowed the seeds of challenges that would later undermine the achievements of his dynasty. Ibn Sina, the final ruler of his dynasty, was confronted with a series of escalating challenges. Provincial governors, once loyal, began to act as independent rulers. They withheld tax revenues and over time declared full autonomy, weakening the central authority. At the same time, nomadic groups from the west, particularly the Amorite tribes, infiltrated and established settlements in areas once dominated by urban life. The situation worsened further with the decline of the agricultural sector. The ancient irrigation systems, which had long supported the heartland's agriculture, faced a severe crisis, a combination of drought and the ongoing process of salinization, where repeated irrigation in an arid climate causes salt to build up in the soil, led to a dramatic reduction in soil fertility. As a result, grain prices surged, according to records from the time, signaling deep agricultural struggles. A letter from Ibn Sina to a provincial governor, Ispira, provides a vivid picture of the deteriorating situation. The governor laments his inability to deliver grain shipments, citing threats from both external nomadic forces and internal rebellions. This correspondence reflects the growing instability that was undermining the very foundations of the empire. In the face of these compounded crises, Ibn Sina's ability to maintain control over his realm seemed increasingly tenuous, with both internal and external pressures threatening to tear the empire apart. Eventually, Ispira asserted his independence as a ruler in the city of Ising, effectively seceding from the once unified state. His reign marked a significant break in the political structure, but it ultimately proved unsustainable. The final blow to his rule came from an external force. The neighboring state of Elam, located in what is now southwest Iran, had grown increasingly powerful. Around 204 BC, Elamite forces, in alliance with other adversaries of Ispira's regime, launched a decisive assault on Ur. The city fell to their advance, its ziggurat desecrated, and its people scattered. Ispira himself was captured and taken to Elam, where he likely died in exile. A contemporary lament from this period poignantly captures the despair of the city's fall. It describes how Ur was defiled, its people reduced to mere shadows, its treasures looted, and its once life-giving river, the Euphrates, now a grave for the dead. This literary work, blending historical record with theological reflection, framed the destruction of Ai as divine retribution for the failings of humanity. Despite the political devastation, however, the fall of Ai did not erase the profound cultural achievements that had marked this Renaissance period. The legal concepts, literary works, administrative techniques, and architectural forms developed during this creative era would continue to shape Mesopotamian civilization for centuries. As one era drew to a close, it laid the groundwork for new political configurations in the land between the rivers. Following the fall of the dynasty, political power in Mesopotamia splintered among several competing city-states. No single power could assert dominance, resulting in a fragmented landscape of small kingdoms, each vying for control of trade routes, water sources, and fertile agricultural lands. This period of nearly a century saw the rise of several prominent regional powers, including Isin, Larsa, Eshnunna, and Mari. These city-states were engaged in constant competition, often forming and breaking alliances to maintain influence over the region. The political fragmentation left Mesopotamia in a state of flux, but it also set the stage for new opportunities and challenges. In addition to the political upheaval, a significant demographic shift occurred during this time. Semi-nomadic groups, known as the Amorites, began to migrate into the settled lands of Mesopotamia. Originating from the Syrian desert, the Amorites had been gradually infiltrating the region for generations, their presence adding another layer of complexity to the already volatile political landscape. The merging of these groups with the indigenous populations marked a transformative period in Mesopotamian history. As different cultures and political entities interacted, the region's future was reshaped, marking the beginning of a new chapter in its rich and turbulent history. Speaking a Western Semitic language, distinct from both the ancient Southern tongue and the Eastern Semitic dialect of the First Empire, these newcomers established dynasties in several cities. One notable leader, Sumuabum, an Amorite, took control of a small, previously insignificant settlement called Babylon around 1894 BC, located on the Euphrates River in central Mesopotamia. This city, whose name meant Gate of the Gods, had long existed without much distinction. Under its new Amorite rulers, however, Babylon began to rise steadily in prominence. For the first century of Amorite leadership, Babylon remained just one power among many in a fragmented political landscape. The city's first 5 rulers worked to expand its territory slowly but surely, building fortifications, temples, and irrigation systems to strengthen their fledgling kingdom. Despite these efforts, Babylon was still overshadowed by other cities like Larsa and Eshnunna, which boasted greater resources and prestige during this early period. Nevertheless, these initial developments laid the groundwork for the city's eventual rise to unprecedented influence in the centuries that followed. With time, Babylon would prove to be far more than just another regional power. What began as a modest kingdom soon transformed into one of the most significant cities in the ancient world, thanks in part to the perseverance and strategic vision of its early Amorite rulers. The geopolitical landscape underwent a dramatic transformation with the ascension of the 6th ruler of the dynasty, a king who would reshape not only his city but the entire region through military might, administrative brilliance, and strategic image building. Around 1792 BC, Hammurabi took the throne, beginning a 43-year reign that would solidify Babylon's status as the dominant force in Mesopotamian civilization. In the early years of his rule, Hammurabi focused on internal development, laying the groundwork for Babylon's future prosperity. He improved the city's infrastructure, extending irrigation canals to support agriculture, renovating temples to reinforce religious authority, and strengthening city walls to ensure security. Through these initiatives, he laid a solid foundation for the economic and political stability of Babylon. At the same time, Hammurabi was astute in cultivating relationships with neighboring powers. He often played the role of mediator in their disputes, carefully avoiding direct conflict as he secured his position. His diplomatic efforts were key to maintaining a delicate balance of power in the region during his early reign. Once his base was firmly consolidated, Hammurabi turned to military expansion. With his position secured, He launched a series of campaigns aimed at dismantling rival power centers, systematically extending Babylon's influence and dominance throughout Mesopotamia. First, Hammurabi targeted southern cities such as Uruk and Essen, gradually expanding his control over the region. With each conquest, he meticulously integrated the defeated territories into his growing empire. One by one, other major powers fell to the might of Babylonian forces. Lhasa, which had dominated much of the south, Esmadi in the Dila region, Mari along the middle Euphrates, and ultimately, Ashur, the northern trading hub that would later birth the Assyrian Empire. By the end of this series of campaigns, Hammurabi had united nearly all of Mesopotamia under a single rule, for the first time since the collapse of the First Empire, 5 centuries earlier. His achievements were unparalleled, and he reshaped the political landscape of the region. Unlike earlier conquerors who sought to revolutionize the existing order, Hammurabi portrayed himself as a conservative leader, one who was dedicated to restoring ancient traditions. His royal inscriptions tell of a king who made the 4 corners of the world bow to him, but more importantly, one who was divinely appointed as a shepherd to bring justice and order to the land. Hammurabi's reign was not just one of conquest, it was a testament to the power of law and stability. He carved out an empire that stood as a beacon of governance, binding together a vast and diverse region under a single rule with a strong emphasis on justice and tradition. This emphasis on justice is famously encapsulated in the set of laws compiled under his rule, the Code of Hammurabi, inscribed on a 2.25-meter-tall stone stele, crowned with an image of the king receiving authority from the sun god, Shamash, contains 2082 legal provisions that cover nearly every facet of society. Discovered by modern archaeologists in 1901, this monument stands as one of the most comprehensive legal collections from the ancient world. The laws themselves reflect a complex society, with clearly defined social classes. Penalties varied based on the status of the individuals involved. Aristocrats, commoners, and slaves all faced different consequences for their actions. The principle of an eye for an eye applied when both parties were of equal rank, while monetary compensation was prescribed when a person of higher status injured someone of lower rank. Despite this hierarchical approach, the code repeatedly emphasizes the protection of the vulnerable. Special provisions were made to safeguard the rights of women, children, and the poor, highlighting a sense of responsibility towards those who were most at risk of exploitation or harm in ancient Babylonian society. Overall, the Code of Hammurabi remains a remarkable testament to the legal and social structures of early civilizations, offering insight into how law and justice were intertwined with the very fabric of ancient Mesopotamian life. To prevent the strong from oppressing the weak and to ensure justice for the orphan and widow, Hammurabi's code was a comprehensive legal framework. It addressed a wide range of issues, from property disputes and inheritance to marriage and divorce. It also set professional standards for workers, such as doctors and builders, and provided regulations for agricultural contracts and commerce. Although often remembered as a lawgiver in both ancient and modern accounts, Hammurabi was equally involved as an administrator and economic manager. His government kept meticulous records of agricultural production, labor distribution, and resource allocation. Royal officials supervised irrigation systems, allocated state lands, fixed prices for essential goods, and regulated trade. Hammurabi's approach to governance was remarkably hands-on. Hundreds of letters that he personally dictated have survived, providing insight into his leadership style. These letters show how he directly addressed complaints from distant provinces, investigated allegations of corruption among local officials, and took charge of religious ceremonies and building projects. This active involvement in both administration and lawmaking reflects Hammurabi's desire to maintain order and fairness throughout his empire, ensuring that all citizens, regardless of their status, were treated with justice. This blend of grand strategy and meticulous administrative attention defined Hammurabi's leadership style. In religious affairs, he elevated Marduk, Babylon's patron deity, from a local figure to the supreme god in the regional pantheon, while still honoring traditional gods such as Enlil, Shamash, and Ishtar. Royal propaganda increasingly presented Marduk as the king of the gods, reflecting Babylon's rising political dominance. The king also depicted himself as divinely chosen, though he stopped short of self-deification, a path some of his predecessors had taken. In the prologue to his law code, he is described as being named by Enlil to promote the welfare of the people and ensure justice prevailed throughout the land. This balance between divine sanction and service to humanity became a core aspect of Babylonian royal ideology. Upon Hammurabi's death around 1750 BC, he left behind a unified kingdom that encompassed most of Mesopotamia, securing his legacy as one of the region's most influential rulers. His son, Sam-Sweluna, inherited what appeared to be a stable realm, but this facade soon unraveled. Within a few short years, uprisings broke out in the southern cities, where older cultural traditions held sway. While initially suppressed, these rebellions continued to resurface, steadily weakening the central authority. As internal unrest grew, a new external threat emerged from the marshlands of the far south. The Sealant dynasty, a powerful people from the region, began to dominate the coastal territories, eventually seizing several key southern cities that had once belonged to Babylon. At the same time, mountain tribes from the Zagros range started launching raids along Babylon's eastern borders, further compounding the empire's troubles. Under the weight of these multiple pressures, Babylon's territorial control began to shrink. By 1700 BC, just 50 years after Hammurabi's death, much of the southern territory had been lost. Though subsequent rulers managed to retain control over central Mesopotamia, the vast empire of their great predecessor was never restored. Despite the territorial losses, Babylon continued to thrive both economically and culturally. The city expanded to cover nearly 450 hectares, with an estimated population of 60,000 to 80,000 people. It became one of the ancient world's greatest urban centers, featuring grand temples, opulent palaces, and bustling commercial districts. Babylon remained a focal point of power and culture. During this period, Babylonian society embraced both the preservation of older traditions and the development of new cultural forms. Scholars worked diligently to compile and protect ancient texts, including literary works, medical treatises, mathematical writings, and religious manuscripts. This intellectual pursuit helped solidify Babylon's cultural legacy. The Akkadian language, which was widely spoken in Babylon, became the international diplomatic language of the Near East. It served as the common means of communication between the various kingdoms spread across the region, enhancing trade and political relations. Babylonian achievements in intellectual fields were particularly noteworthy. Astronomers, mathematicians, and medical practitioners advanced their disciplines, with Babylonian astronomers famously developing some of the first predictive mathematical models for understanding planetary movements. These groundbreaking contributions laid the foundation for future scientific endeavors. Mathematicians of the time used an advanced numeral system that enabled them to perform intricate calculations, such as operations with fractions, solving quadratic equations, and approximating irrational numbers like the square root of 2. This period of intellectual creativity flourished for nearly 2 centuries following Hammurabi, despite Babylon's gradual loss of territorial control. The dynasty managed to preserve political stability within its core regions, and its cultural influence spread far beyond its political boundaries. However, this period of growth and stability came to an abrupt and catastrophic end. Around 1595 BC, a completely unexpected threat emerged from the north. The Hittites, an Indo-European people from central Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, had been quietly establishing their own kingdom far from the Mesopotamian heartlands. Under the leadership of the ambitious king Mursili I, the Hittites launched a surprise attack. Mursili's forces embarked on a military campaign that took them more than 500 miles from their homeland. This was no ordinary raid. It was an unprecedented military operation that would change the course of history. The Hittites' swift and destructive advance took the Babylonians completely off guard. In a matter of months, the Hittites devastated Babylon's defenses, resulting in the sudden collapse of the once great city. This unexpected shift in power marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in the ancient world. The Babylonians, focused primarily on the traditional threats from the east and south, were completely unprepared for the attack from the north. The Hittites, seizing the opportunity, breached Babylon's defenses, looted its treasures, and overthrew the ruling dynasty that had held power for 3 centuries. After this devastating raid, the Hittites withdrew back to their homeland in Anatolia, seemingly content with the spoils of war, rather than seeking to occupy the city. In the power vacuum left by this unexpected and shocking attack, another group began to rise to prominence. This group, the Kassites, had gradually increased their influence in northern Mesopotamia over time. Originally from the Zagros Mountains, the Kassanites had served as mercenaries and had settled in Babylonian territory for generations, slowly gaining a foothold in the region. Sokotan kongwachiyoshetet, onyongda toshetet, zashikle gaiwan Babylon. Sidlewan trib du dai makodai to saviknan, mokdu helaom bien ko chingchudo, linkotan kongwachiyoshetet, aswishiklian ring mukhukashetet, kunram gender swilindo benagwa Babylon.
Henrik hevsetemode. Dan hamtron te su tungyo, wongyo vafongu tu kwa
Babylon.
Ho du chi, the fahui ko, frekanjen, kunstung venhak, kumhika funka king truk tatun.
Mil de hegu Mesopotamia soni the Nunan Turkey kwa Hammurabi, Urmo Turkey Hong Kim. Unjada ma kumlido prixi wa da vundat som kuvigi tonka daram chidu kaiche sangjos. De la un Turkey ma gwejin kanhando swe hin yong, wa uddin. Shidet muet Babylon, do dat bon hestong faklup makne wa kumbeam. From the city that would remain its cultural heart for millennia, a new chapter began. After the dramatic Hittite raid that brought down the mighty Hammurabi dynasty, a new group rose to power over Babylon and its vast territories. The Kassites, once mountain dwellers from the Zagros range to the east, had slowly woven themselves into the fabric of Mesopotamian society over generations, initially serving as mercenaries. They had settled in rural areas and adopted the local customs, becoming an integral part of the region's everyday life. Seizing the moment created by the power vacuum, a Kassite leader named Agum II made his bold move, claiming the throne of Babylon. His rise marked the beginning of a new era. Agum II established what would become the longest ruling dynasty in Mesopotamian history, a testament to his vision and strength. The Kassites, once outsiders, had now firmly embedded themselves in the heart of one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. Lixi Wumdetna, Kunimbabanna, Kwanjon, Donase Kaitri Kunigredansao, Katweka Kurgat Samradit Sode, Nindwena Kon Atgatnin Nether Yo Lao, Meneda da Hoteknen, Waduchika Punstung Wana Watunja Kovumdatovia Hoja Ran Gadenme, Shinan Ling Vaga performed for Guantri Kunigretini, Yeraswe Kaitri Goho, Kuvigina de Saikwa un Turkey Udin Zaket. Tuelda Kassid Duchi Quimlotlas Thirche Bonsechi. Verkongnen Tongzos Tergenda, Hoda Tauduvagu Nim Tan Sumchek. Sofa Kuvigi Fajing Duchi Swe Udin. Morgdu Tri Talodiji Chep Vernin Seki da Pren de la Swe Kaitrid Kwekasit. Dingvamjay Thechia Sabazat, Duna Seki Chibiwan Tsirkongyen. Gahoso Lixi Dabada Shujam Nu Yohad. Tunke Kayin Soshak va Turkini. Shintalodina Jukchunta Yoserva Kaftuk. Matri Dodekasi de Shedvak va Tsunkukulukumin. Toisno. Vigaskan Yuda Chua the Gaida Dagwaho. Verka Taludi Danda Fatakanhin. Dunasang Chumtachi Kota Fungura Venizi da Sorasong Turjan Do Quatrioda Kassid. Kikwilova Hagwanzugoho. Wasangzandan Hinsham. Montvanku no ho sua de chi Hammurabi. Ningrai doi chi quin kuso wong loi Babylon. Aprehin kamwo quan hea jiao ching viva ka kok dio ne chote un sue baye de zo. Jong boi kan, chen chi de que wong sendon vertire ting da. Varturkina, komko un selrid na rumak. Le songchi tuambo kuvig. Levada, un so vango go kum tunda. Tasham kaima kashujia vokala kolabo kakodgo. Elon histon ga mwe kwan he kadtram valin min godui chi. Shuk badan sue uddin strong kuveki. Binkad go wakaisita gwa Babylon. Wang Wu I Tsepmer no Rengong la Do Shu Zagum, Kaku Biane, Il Kofrontoreum Bull Reditrum, Chengchi, Puktop, Norma Mogo Thilu, Il Fakanaki Lang Sung de Duchi Quilu, Batinke Dong Ming, Kappa Vang Wok, Babylon. I accept for Gathilu Lancer. Vui konin generally dringbit som ge duite Quilu Aswe Amwazan Gumun. Dune Fanan un Turkey. Fui bendon gungum vokum tuve qualixis fendon koda. Deku Hittite Anatolia, Warangok Metani sa mim back Syria. Besaudala Warangok trung Syria. Quan he kukte mije kok tu kuna yau ka jau fluk jiao de the silib virtue finis pro hongjia de which bandat set. Beza unyo akadia. Unyo kukte guaka mue quan he jiao tued. Sa kud hunnen hongjia de tsungku ka liming ching chud uwe ka kung chua de gedenga trio din wenma. Ditsemve nekua hi mung ho actra. Cox warnian vadaso. Tadichun samina trenaidong, established mje kashudo. Kaframva aswadnia wagong jiao. Shen buddhas tu amana. Unkaluchuru jiao befayin so I chop. Bauchum November Linquan de Gamo Quane Jiao Wagako Swantam J. Kavongone. The correspondence between the Kassite kings and Egyptian pharaohs reveals the intricate balance of both cooperation and competition that shaped their international relations. One Kassite ruler, in a letter to Pharaoh Amenhotep III, complained about the insufficiency of gold sent as a diplomatic gift. He remarked that gold in Egypt was as plentiful as dust and requested more generous offerings to support his grand building projects. Within their own domain, the Kassite monarchs governed through an administrative system that drew on earlier models but was distinguished by unique innovations. Among these innovations was a new approach to land management, wherein they granted larger estates to favored individuals. These administrative changes were key to maintaining power and supporting the monarch's ambitious building programs. As the Kassites engaged in both diplomatic and internal reforms, they displayed a deep understanding of how to leverage resources for political and economic gain. The correspondence and policies highlight the dynamic nature of their reign and their strategic interactions with powerful neighbors like Egypt. Koktindu Trung, Singdu Giran, Quanimbyu Takuduru Chengse, Shunde Dhamok Bin Ni. Bukchi Tegoku Krilu Abusum Siring Seng, Tenkonian Len Biendove Upkia Idam, Viram, Chothan, Histan Digne, Tura Omoe Quane, Fonkimio Wang Tu, Wa Term Kroeb Kutu, Kodatdai, Gafrikan, Tungyo Fenan Swe Kekuk, Mije Swe Temum, Waswe Tinoa, Kagi Sinurbionstonko Mesopotamia, Bunjovido Trungsem Son Benile Ko Nanwit. De ninja kagait da over vishin wo yogerjing her zum pantheon. Ho dat be chutron den kavi shirin wu tru, lenka we katente. Kafan va sui fadring gwa ka hestom tungyo, legan, ching vi her, kun sat ding von hok. Sampu trifoko buku turkine vajot some chuyu, madu sui moran quense kopun himche. Gater yung her with da bautun va fadri. In chunstung wen hok hose. Kakhogze da bin soam kodansak tunghok, hestungwa kingfuk, goromo lingvugik, vetunguk ka sironsan den chandor yihok, vaka amle fatli den ga dayung fak. Hignebu sutap ko hestung nai chinlan in nudu topen som de tochuk kingfuk, kak bakwa. Kwansaten wunho grana chinseka som jaduna. Kak mya chiem ching kota da lg chundongwa ga hamching. Lekten Indian Bauko Lenquan Dengasreken. Kakbelum Hongia. Ning Kwansat Bandal Shukvedremuk de Sessenda. Dandam Tiklu Sen Ka Badude. Quada de Doroga Sweken Tente. Tewang Ka Puftot. Histon Kung Homdado. Chi Ecliptic some 12 dot Shoyang Vikachom Sao. Bada Hingshen Ur Shemjong Jidone. Kak Tailudi Wikui Foku Turkey Ne Chuke Promfak Cha Ben Kep. Gekub Shagat hat Puet Kekib Fonfak, der Cheat Friafing is a Pardo Protuk, La Chedu Anum, Linkada, Sunkonin Kenthian Tim Ling, Ilib, Gavernin Yanin, Sidian Sun, Hei Kwai, Gara Bentit, Gasak Chando Linkaka Buriuchung, Da Kwansavaka Dido Vapafak Dochid, Hatuk,
Các befan phạc đế trịa thêm xoay quan xa lang sang tinh thể, mà du hiếu bè khoai sinh li hờ gòn đài chê kem chê. Bringstung intuk thêm xoay sang tro ki tuk srong kron slogan yêu phiêu. Dado silib, phong cát đặt chân qua cả con đợt rô. Nó bết wel với cả hin song gân ép chiket tim mi, chitet the sexo. Nhetuk buick kom lu temong ni chunstong soda. Don tua tetsu ni yutu tinte và cả nion van hafek nào. Samsuk tue trom, da de on tring do, ching shomer. Vaninsiki bin masa do chita gen bring tram. Babylon drosan trungsam hanjing va vunha. Norfadring mangne ka the kingte yibad utok. Work du, kom kon hung mangni turaki detsi dona tribute a Hammurabi. Babylon virjon. Drungsam do shurus winning den trangle. Ga ku chode timnap winning ku pune tetu duichi vido quanchong song segi kodai. Hap kni ga kaicha, sait. Delendu tu se. In den vida qua marduk. Vovevi se, qua Babylon. Riung trungsam tungyo hando. Versue tun o marduk. Hogafen duchi sui hui hon qua Babylon qua kathit. Trongstos diakie kaitride lo. Gavoa kasiti trio duichi moya kwan he. Hobin vekathirud landske. Yupren unjau hala. Chingfu krens wado. Chaklo de flu ka moya kwan he kote. Le duichi ubdin shovanku. Chijing don nora. Chung chuyo lenkwan denin kuviki bingi. Obela feneng suswe zamra deben ma. Daviteim tamwa. Moren yont. This relatively peaceful approach contributed to the dynasty's longevity, but it eventually left them vulnerable to more militaristic neighbors. To the north, a resurgent Assyria gradually expanded its territory under ambitious rulers like Adad Nerari I and Shalmaneser. Once a commercial city-state, focused on trade networks, Assyria evolved into an aggressive territorial state with a formidable military. By the 13th century BC, Assyrian forces began challenging Kassite control over northern Mesopotamia, pushing the region into an era of instability. The balanced system of great powers began unraveling around 100 BC, a time marked by increasing conflict as various forces vied for dominance. This period of turmoil set the stage for shifting power dynamics across the ancient Near East. A series of dramatic upheavals reshaped the Near Eastern landscape. The Hittite Empire suddenly collapsed. Its capital, Hattusa, was destroyed and abandoned. At the same time, Egyptian power dwindled, weakened by internal problems, and the mysterious raids of the Sea Peoples. Trade networks disintegrated, and many urban centers either declined or were completely abandoned. Historians continue to debate the causes of this widespread disruption. Climate change might have triggered crop failures and famine, exacerbating the crisis. Additionally, the movements of large populations brought new groups into conflict with established powers. Though the exact combination of factors remains unclear, the result was a period of significant upheaval, which would leave lasting marks on the region. Susupto Guthiriadodon, Makana Shuhuk, Bogala Susupto Guthiriadodon, La Seppe, Hestumbuka Katruchamchira Kinte, Da Duichi Trictu Kuvaki. Trongbutsen Hunlutne, Wangbo Katsitede Chote, Sui Kinkom Sangchui, Wukwa Dudosu Kongo Kum Tia, Tuna, Nin Aplugnegan Jatang Vukum, Dadrone Kwas, Hundu Alamver Min Taknam, Iran da Tinhan, Nikotamkug Legan Tanpava Yongto Babelak Pli Bujalam, Shatruk Ni Hunter, Da Shiwa, Wan Shendit Tankok Wakong Man Jignukshik TCN. Searching Donga Shangpu Quan Trong Wamandi Nyam Bao Wagwanha, Bao Chung Kanyin Di Sen Kuija. Victory in Iran's Sin and the law code of Hammurabi. This Elamite invasion severely weakened the Kassitids' control. Around 155 BC, a native Babylonian dynasty from the ancient southern city of Isin rose to power, ending 4 centuries of Kassite rule. The second dynasty of Enisin sought to restore Babylonian glory by undertaking ambitious building projects and launching aggressive campaigns against Elam. Some success was achieved under rulers like Nebuchadnezzar I, who recovered stolen divine statues and cultural treasures. Despite the political shift,
the cultural continuity of Babylon was maintained. The legacy of Babylonian achievements, particularly in law and architecture, remained influential throughout the centuries. These efforts underscored the enduring importance of Babylon's cultural identity, even amidst the turbulence of foreign invasions and political upheaval. The Kassite period left a profound and lasting legacy on Babylonian civilization. Their extended rule, marked by relative stability, fostered intellectual and cultural growth, even without significant territorial expansion. This era saw the systematic organization of knowledge, the advancement of astronomical observations, the development of land management systems, and the establishment of artistic traditions. These achievements would continue to influence Mesopotamian civilization for centuries. The foundations laid during this time became key to the advancement of subsequent generations. As the Bronze Age transitioned into the Iron Age around 1000 BC, new powers and peoples emerged, reshaping the geopolitical landscape of Mesopotamia. Despite these changes, the cultural underpinnings established during the Kassite period remained a significant force, building a foundation that would influence the region for generations to come. These contributions, though overshadowed by new empires and shifting power dynamics, continued to echo throughout the history of Mesopotamia. Millennia of prior development had established a robust foundation that allowed Babylonian civilization to endure significant political upheavals. This enduring framework eventually enabled the civilization to experience a revival under subsequent dynasties. While Babylon thrived in a period of relative stability under the rule of the Kassites, a formidable power was quietly emerging in the northern regions of Mesopotamia, in the fertile lands nourished by the upper Tigris River, characterized by rolling hills and agriculture reliant on seasonal rainfall. The Assyrians were forging a society known for its military might, organizational efficiency, and unyielding resolve. Initially focused around the ancient trading hub of Asha, the Assyrians began to build an empire defined by their strategic mastery and aggressive expansion. Their military strategies, combined with exceptional governance, positioned them as a dominant force in the region. The Assyrian society, shaped by its rigorous discipline and relentless pursuit of power, would soon come to challenge the established order, heralding a new chapter in the history of the ancient Near East. Ingit Prafum Bakna, Salkilek Ten Guaming, Bero Deduchi Mebreleb Sonio Kemon Anatolia, Di Tunghai Vapenam Mesopotamia, Kinyazaya Buhari Ningwe Tungjian Sung Sonio Kote, Demangre Chohosuerensuk Rengo Gakogovi Gatayan Saso, Kinsukna, Sane Sefufucho Tambodeche Guho, Quatsin Chummin Veron Sampo Somio, Shun on Seluk Moran, Bada, Dezen Dadan, Vakiki Yildam Satrasertse, Kongim, Shingwe Kaitri Dopen, U Esha, Jubilitz, Tayuetim, Kongfanan Duexem Shignipship Septem Rexembig Ishupat Chur Kongim, Des Kuktin Suedukudoka Kokuk Langyung Rabada Kantwin Vachunchukuvik, Trong. Jong Butchtugito Faro I Xap, Vivone Tuhao Tunba, Minglama Vivoa Vida, Nang, Veka Kobgu Go Fe, Daila Unsuitade na Yamos Vavisa Chode Qua Assyria, Yuma Seluk no, Be, Sechunmine Finanse Tu Tinva Precham Queka na Lyomdat Assyria, Songde Skaktin Quin, Diose Lyomdado Quaka Viwaketik, Movyuse Lyomdad Tozederesan on Shenrod Tonyo. Edad Niradi, I of a Shalmanisadi can, the Moberan Queen Quisova Seki Basadevid Chio Kungyan, Quada Silib Gachion Shudo Dogesen, Tokon Yon, Quada Silib Gachion Shudo de Shudo Gosabia, Tronkika Kokok, Kuvigiak Fe Suyo Vasupto Dose Shao Tron Song Shodai Tau Vakam Nan Noyubengitifzien, Assyria Vern Zedzem Vaduiti Dosuk Mak. Magdu Kosue Kokum Tam Tiwe, Nenkukjane Vanchazukdo Tam Hangwan Buim Chong Kuvegi, Mund Bugno Gret, Frixedaden, Song Triu Dagwa Tiglav Pidi, Vivwa Nangliotne Datinan, Kakochentran Il, Rechu Heg Gorpe Bako Chio Il Ramenia, Gerpetag Dogu Bobin Destern Hay, Gerpeton Verdin Nudi Zagras, the Gerpenam Tankong Byung to Babylon. Idman Viokieg wo on to Hauga Jevu qua som Euphrates to set Yedikira lisherated, Hey Hinavne. Tetrasymbuson doctrine Corvan Queen Assyria, de la Chembin Watusen, Soki Tiglath-Pileser, Quadai, Assyria Begbevo Nakada Suitwa, Lipsishwa Deche Assyria, Kodai Gahaitsichi, Tunen, Sungjaidwan Nai. In Aprib Ferga Gumbula Armenia Kumbanim Vacation, Umbu, Tehimchi Queen Kusalang Togo Deche, Magduve, Gayaki Quilitsui Gen, Gatod Chichokotwa Yotu Venavan Tetu Fadring, Tanim Tang Sukchek, Choswe Fadring, Deche Sung Chonglai. Ude, Che, Gak, New Korknan. Nin Yutu Quandrong Juk Syria, Verrevemoren, Ven Dasndo Hinshan, Kakoso Hattern Wundiva, Vachungjin, Kumbeka Yotu Quinswe Magne. The Toren Nintang, Choswe Bang Trong Don King Chang Gukude Chene Vaseki Xorkongyen. La Vivua Nobupchil Chung Dia Toha Sok, Makwe Syria. La Tiglath-Pileser the Sad. Sholninissa the Sad. Chingdanosse Lyongdado Guaho. Kukache Gudeche Dado Faja Yonka Ko Hestung. Daniel Mongzim Chek Choswe Morena Hin Yong Sanai. Hekim Yaka Quan Chon Shong Quen Shui. Hanjing. Dashuk Assyria Toshanum Kongo Kuviki. Wahoda Chobi Sinsangchuni Shinkungdo Sungase Teo. Assyria, with its capital at modern-day Nimrud, saw the construction of a grand palace adorned with stone reliefs that celebrated royal accomplishments. These detailed carvings depicted scenes of military victories, royal hunts, and religious rituals, serving as powerful propaganda. These visual stories would later be expanded upon by future rulers, solidifying the monarchy's influence. The inauguration of the palace was an extraordinary event, with over 69,500 guests attending over a span of 10 days. It was a dazzling display of both wealth and the empire's organizational prowess, highlighting the vast resources and the careful planning behind Assyria's political and military power. The Assyrian army itself became an unstoppable force thanks in large part to innovations in military technology. The introduction of iron weapons, replacing the traditional bronze, gave the army a significant technological advantage, allowing them to dominate their enemies with unmatched efficiency. These advances were not only military, they were also symbolic of the broader Assyrian ambition. The grandeur of the palace, coupled with military supremacy, was a testament to the empire's ability to blend cultural, political, and military might into a cohesive and dominant force. Specialized units, including charioteers, cavalry, archers, and siege engineers, operated in a coordinated manner. A corps of professional soldiers was bolstered by seasonal conscripts and auxiliaries from conquered territories. These diverse forces worked together seamlessly, adapting to various combat scenarios with efficiency and precision. Logistics were given special attention, with meticulously planned supply chains ensuring that military operations could be sustained in far-flung regions. These logistical systems were a critical component of the army's success, enabling them to maintain their effectiveness even in the most challenging environments. The administrative systems of the empire were as sophisticated as its military operations. Conquered territories were organized into provinces, each governed by appointed officials who were directly accountable to the king. This structure ensured that the realm was tightly controlled and that regional governance aligned with the central authority. Local nobles from newly integrated regions could be incorporated into the governance system, allowing for a smooth transition of power and the reinforcement of loyalty. This approach helped maintain stability and fostered a sense of unity within the empire, even as new territories were brought under its control. The imperial structure was designed to maintain control over the vast Assyrian empire, with local rulers often required to send their sons to the Assyrian capital. These young men were educated there, but more importantly they served as hostages to ensure their father's loyalty to the empire. This system helped the Assyrians maintain a tight grip on their territories. The Assyrians developed an extensive network of roads, way stations, and messenger systems, which allowed for swift communication across their empire. This infrastructure was vital for both military operations and administrative efficiency, ensuring that orders could be relayed quickly from the capital to distant provinces. One of the most infamous aspects of Assyrian rule was their calculated use of terror as a political tool. Royal inscriptions and palace reliefs graphically depicted the brutal punishments meted out to rebels. Flaying, impalement, and mass executions were among the most common methods. These punishments were intended to instill fear and maintain control. Cities that dared to resist Assyrian rule were completely destroyed, their inhabitants deported to far corners of the empire. While many of these accounts were likely exaggerated for propaganda purposes, they nonetheless reflect the Assyrians' ruthless approach to governance and their unyielding power. General Kutchadid Kushen Tron Shamli Salide Mutilam Nam Lom Sekanquas. De Cheda Moran Magnidra Tiglath Pilas a 30 da Santa Lamathar Septibi Jasit TCN. Wulen Ing, La Prehenin Kalkatsura, Tiglath Pilas. The Sartha Kiditsa Jatutchikla Hastung 2, Chiaga 2. Josan Kadan Vino hardest stai Wachiksan Kastunduk Chiklunio Quan Ongo Mother and Day Didia Dinku Hanyard. Odgo Dintok Biching Fudiku Komza Deche Lenangan Dogobon Segdi Prav Genka Kan Kang. No guy. Onsong Kelka Krenduri. Selib Unrugliat Krenduri Tomsring Gohaz. Genswe Pujagwakatan Bin Mufai. Detriodakwa Tiglath Pise 3rd. Lanin Sunkung Nobel. The Bidla Shankung ko Onstung ko Chen the Senachab, the Sadur. Dechenid Amoran the Swimo Chupina Fe. Shichingling Pramgo Kuvik Tai Iran. Dentrung Sam I Xap. The Vin Persia. Chuda Vung Trung Anatolia. We Yung Toran Gori where Decida Bao Chun Liu Miotram Tuna. Mium Kinte Wadinku Dade. Tara Woven Taksuk Sung Kong Takwanle. Mo Kwan Him Shi Ra Bebebalan. Fenang Suifadria wa Babylon Fenang Suifadria Koshenude Dego the Tujan. Manda, Govwa Assyria, Zateim Sui Tumchong Dova Babylon, Budji Jatira, Vanwa Lol Diego Sunfune, Tunan, Tiglath Piles of the Third Ryabdung Umchatik Thibir, Dio Kondjum Prunstung, Letsung Kokrilruth, 2-1 Pezis 01 2050. Freen Tweet 3, Vivwa Na. Deba Funchik Rigbet. La Vivwa per Babylon, Ver Wogai Vishren Wa Bebreshren Wan, Contrai, Goong Shalmanes Evi. Tetu Dui Chi Punstung Ne, Ishran Brevi Fwa Bebreshren Wan, Kisaga 2 Renging Vanaz Sechidi Tieda Simin. Ongum de Osuri per 5 Rabu, Wa Bebreshren Wan D. Vishran Brevi Shivishran. Trinan, Contrai Goong Senacarib. La Cante Abaman Veswe Hutrolendud Qua Babylon Vapa Bebreshran. Vishran Brevi the Seve Vivi Fashli Vualendreshran. So Kidaptak Lukuinodai. Senacarib da Kunso Kin Menvanan Yuksep Techuk TVN. Veralem Pa Huel Huanton Babylon. Vishran Brevi Shran Wa Bebreshran Wan. Wilverting Gai So Ki Shoden Tsen Quen Chong Vetungel Vavama Kwasumpune. Rishran Brevi Vishivi. Ishran Brevi Fun Wa Bebreshran. Hestung Tur Tebi Pa Huoi. Ga Gunden Bi Sen Bion. Lagasung Shinin Bi Pa Huoi. The sacred image of Marduk, Babylon's revered patron deity, was taken hostage and carried off to Assyria. This act disrupted the region's religious practices, as it prevented the performance of essential religious ceremonies. The move, though intended to exert control, backfired by inciting religious outrage not only in Babylon but throughout the surrounding territories, and even within Assyria itself. The assassination of Sennacherib in 61 BC, allegedly while he was praying in a temple, was widely seen as divine retribution for his sacrilegious actions against Babylon. This event shook Assyria to its core, and the repercussions were felt throughout the empire. The message seemed clear: violating religious traditions had consequences that even the mightiest rulers could not escape. Following his father's death, Esarhaddon, Sennacherib's son, took a dramatically different approach. He reversed his father's policies and immediately set about rebuilding Babylon, making it one of his first royal priorities. As a pragmatic ruler, Esarhaddon understood the importance of religious and ideological respect in maintaining peace and stability. His decision to restore Babylon signaled a shift towards reconciliation and strategic diplomacy. In contrast to his father's hard-handed approach, Esarhaddon's actions reflected his awareness that ideology and respect for sacred customs were essential to securing both his reign and the loyalty of his subjects. More effective than brutality in maintaining control, Assyrian inscriptions highlight his role as a restorer and builder, rather than a mere destroyer. He skillfully preserved the distinct cultural identities of both Assyria and Babylonia, ensuring that both regions remained under his rule without diminishing their individuality. The Assyrians also achieved what had eluded his predecessors, the conquest of Egypt. In 67 BC, Assyrian forces captured Memphis, the ancient capital of Lower Egypt, and took control of the Nile Delta region, marking a pivotal moment in Assyrian expansion. This remarkable accomplishment extended Assyrian influence to its farthest territorial reach, solidifying its dominance over the region. The Assyrian Empire reached its height under its final major ruler, Ashurbanipal, who reigned from 6068 to 6027 BC. During his rule, the empire expanded across vast territories, creating a multi-continental empire that stretched far and wide. Ashurbanipal's reign marked the peak of both Assyrian culture and territorial control, establishing him as one of the most powerful kings in history. What set Ashurbanipal apart from other Assyrian kings was his remarkable blend of military strength and intellectual achievements. Unlike many of his predecessors, he openly boasted of his literacy and scholarly pursuits. This unique combination of attributes allowed him to rule not only as a fierce warrior, but also as a patron of knowledge and culture. Under Ashurbanipal's patronage, the library at Nineveh became a hub of intellectual activity. The collection amassed there was one of the most significant of its time, preserving a wealth of texts from across Mesopotamia. These included works on literature, religion, science, and history, recorded on approximately 30,000 clay tablets. This vast repository of knowledge played a crucial role in the cultural development of the empire and ensured the survival of ancient wisdom for future generations. Ironically, it was the eventual violent destruction of the Assyrian Empire that helped preserve these invaluable texts. The devastation that engulfed Nineveh led to the survival of these artifacts, which would be uncovered centuries later, providing a glimpse into the intellectual and cultural legacy of the Assyrian civilization. Merdu domrer kubo Syria trungu kontabidamba. Den prekte. Teche ni fadoma vazret ujo van de kutru nyengchun, ve krikso. On young turun no dergo, turago yon yo lo kran sui vahanjung ho. Kokshin lenyen. Madu manga shen yu from baksungfum. Nen writes ara gangnan do ve nin rik vakal senduchi neom kinte. Shendin tok bichi. Lindud bididio. Waboklo. Dazendaven sinrasue oan ren soshog dove akstung chigwa Assyria. Kistang neben. Tetu duichido don lukdonaswe leondado kwa eshiabana Paul. Tunya. Kacheko on vakong nan. Shubiano that is it said me theas tiesetsi. Kungyan. The foibe sui mungman, that suited that de ki vian mang ne tai ashiabana. Paul quadie, deche. Bado ro rone yo biendwa sui su yo ben strong. De nature ke confametur, le yu wimbebra. Tran chop. Kuike ha, jalam, su yu, kuiru chung rang vadun turabank, come word de doa verben ma regan jatang. Vanan sukshibik shubluk tcn, Babylon. The Nosweke trib were tridu da Chaldean, the Nava palasa leondado, tungba duklip. Venda, kodnodugana trib was sin la umstumni kodnolutin ki kuge Babylon, makan ruklerta Syria, the deptak ruyu lansa, tuna. Neve palasa, the chonto munla, unna leondado kimpur retanan, angegel kia. Do mawasuk makra Assyria, onko hinshun the mumbing was I did the Medes. When I don't hook Iran, da yazdu vigo yom wango hung mak ta day nugi zagrad in mean Babylon, Medes are nade that hanko trinte vot trung sem Assyri. Hmervernin sumpugo, den la shudo de guk, ashab supdovanan shukspsad so kumyan, teola Nineveh hanan shuksib bi so kumyan. So kud bolveka daibama, shin sumgulenga den dai trang le bi shurui, tulb sumtonat. Kobal bi kurbo, wood triodin, Assyrian no be, gosenlip di haram, the Ture, Zongen Turgen Nang, Nin Danan Shukdaring, Jebder Kong Yun, in Doklub Kwa Assyria the Hanton Beat said, Susupto Gwa Assyria, Denra, Nyongmu, Konkem Zi, Sui Trezegu, Munde Chi de Stong Chi Wum Sundon, Soz Hang Heki, de Biemme Song Chak Dongot, de Megistong Vom Kai Se, Nin Som Poshudo Hentoa, de Bi Bo Hung. Their once magnificent buildings were reduced to overgrown mounds. The prophet Nahum's triumphant depiction of Nineveh's downfall, crying out, "Woe to the city of blood, full of lies," echoed the profound disdain that Assyria's imperial practices had inspired among the conquered peoples. Even in the face of such devastation, Assyria left behind a lasting legacy. Their imperial systems, designed to control vast territories, became blueprints for future empires. The network of roads, administrative centers, and communication systems they built facilitated military and economic integration across regions that were once fragmented. Assyria's efforts in governance and infrastructure set the stage for later empires to build upon. The establishment of these systems allowed for a level of coordination and control that had been previously unheard of in the ancient world. Moreover, the practice of gathering and preserving knowledge from across their empire ensured that much of their intellectual and cultural heritage endured, even as their cities fell to ruin. The Assyrian Empire preserved countless cultural and literary works for future generations. Perhaps most significantly, it marked the first successful attempt to create a truly international political order, uniting diverse peoples, languages, and traditions under a single government. This was a remarkable achievement, albeit one achieved through brutal methods. Following the fall of the Assyrian Empire, a revitalized Babylonian state emerged, ushering in one last glorious chapter in Mesopotamian civilization. The Neo-Babylonian, or Chaldean Empire, although lasting less than a century, achieved such cultural brilliance and historical importance that its legacy remains firmly etched in history. Nam, 6260 CN, Nabopolisa. Onildadu Kwakabuto Chaldean, Zadun sa min nam Mesopotamia, Zakai Singra Turkey Hong Kim Chob, Shakoke Deci Assyria Suyo, On Tombo Doklib Vabada Tsunku Queen Lut Taka Vomdat Planam. Leon, Ming Shindrolit, Wagren Meds, the Kunsek Shik Mak Twinsek Quinsek Le Nibopolisa, Lodos Rin Tib Wasus Tung Tree Quid Assyria, Chinua Quikang Shinai, Masumpu Nineveh, Shudo Que Assyria, the Bisupto Vanan, Shubdanu Ju Bibuzi TCN, Danza Sue Ketu Quidece Assyria, Sokai Syria Supto, Nebopolasar. Fadom Avaniva Vokum Koakan Latayas Dvug, Kugya Hung Mak. Tuinao Ong de Sankong Song Date Sidin Nim Mongzam Chek, Cho Babylon. Od Sumpo Ne Dorsanom Song Nin Kod Go Isa Chonkuvi, Dinwe Nedza Sekwa Hang Theki Bistung Tribo Gwenbang. Vo Tyranid Da, On Bada Ka Dian Tai Se Sonia Sumpo Go, So Chiglai Ka Histong Hangjing, The Kanbing on Liu Shik Chumday. Katern Club, Cleared Put, Babylon Kodjun Gan Ingwe Song Kobithwat. Chaldean, Kion Quader, Vonan Shupsalon Word Avan Shubal Shivani, Ukaduktur Dvagdo Unim Tang, Udin, Levada, Kuntrayon Koteas Dvuk Disen Vida, Lekan Kuntraida, Nebuchadnezzar Basida, Shedrasan Ninwath Dinhing Turkiani, La Viva Kotrida Kadai Sadang Nan, Bien Babylon Senchampul Long Laviesa Strong Segi Kodai. Wakam the longer so Kecha Komija, Yevoa Chuk the Sensangdo Mawashop, demonstrating military prowess as crown prince. He led armies against Egyptian forces, attempting to fill the power vacuum left by the fall of the Assyrian Empire. Nabopolassar's early campaign successfully secured the western territories of the former Assyrian domain, extending Babylonian control through Syria and Palestine all the way to the Egyptian border. His fateful siege of Jerusalem in 5097 BC, followed by a more devastating conquest in 5087 BC, marked a turning point in history. The Hebrew temple was destroyed, and the Judean elite were exiled to Babylon, a monumental event in Jewish history. This pivotal moment is poignantly described in biblical texts and remains etched in the collective memory of the Jewish people. Nebuchadnezzar's military strategy was not just about territorial expansion. It was a demonstration of his vision to consolidate power and reshape the region's political landscape. His actions played a crucial role in the transition from Assyrian dominance to the rise of Babylonian supremacy. The aftermath of these events was felt deeply across generations. The fall of Jerusalem and the exile of the Judeans shaped much of the cultural and religious identity of the Jewish people, marking a period of profound reflection and transformation. Nebuchadnezzar, having secured the borders of his empire through decisive military victories, shifted his focus towards the internal development of Babylon. With the stability brought by military success, he now had the resources to fund grand projects that would forever change the city. The wealth flowing into the imperial treasury from tribute, trade, and agriculture enabled Nebuchadnezzar to initiate an ambitious building program. This program aimed to transform Babylon into one of the greatest marvels of the ancient world, making it a symbol of both power and innovation. Although Babylon had a long history that stretched back nearly 2,000 years, Nebuchadnezzar's vision was to reshape it on an unprecedented scale. He sought to turn the ancient city into a grand metropolis, befitting his imperial aspirations. The most striking of his architectural achievements were the colossal new walls of the city. These walls were so thick that it was said a four-horse chariot could turn around on them, emphasizing the strength and immensity of the construction. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon would become a lasting testament to the power and creativity of his reign.
Sam Babylon Moverensan, Zetzikial, Perpetual Siho, Muheston Kilak, but updated on Nur, Versum Kill Fretisio. Muheston Kilak, but updated on Nur, Versum Kill Fretis. Shan, some Shan Kundum, Chenga Lada Vo, Trang Tree Beyond, Bionka for you Gakman Mosta Susu, Rong Vabotot, Kamon Katrungsam. Tungel the Hanchan Quanjung,
Dekbit, Inzong Nistela, Kunte, Ben, Dien Choshiren, Marduk, Vishiren Ba Hodukwa Babylon, Tatrungsamkwa Kuntene, La Zigurat Itaminanki, Kim Tsu Ta Tong Ludoyezdevuk, Binyang New Del Masek, Kao Hud Dai, Kotelanyon Kanying Chotap Bebel, Trong King Sen. Suvidagwa Kontring Ne Konjisa Yumo. Makosa Chincha Chamling, Manodatse. Zigurat Itamanki Launtrong Nebuson Magni Yes Akunim Wenming Babylon. Payim Se Kekubcha Tongyo Waku. Histon Seer, Ratchugokundong. Ragno Konjifu for Mukdi Joutsong Escala Mingchong Jose Tong Ming Strong Guanlin Wedadoshi. Shindung Pulada Voiva Katakrim Yutuk Musja. Kaluay Tu Mangne. Ladzan, where Unim Wenming Hung Mak. Binkada, Seg, Laun Kontrin Hingtron, In Ben Chung, Norujet Song Wen Kwamaduk, and in Hobal Tsik Luni Vakovom Zat Dabi Chinfu, Ka, Kovigik Song, Elaine Hongdiagum Konkem Pan Trang Le, Waluyu Sen Viran, the Hutreon Tekdong the To Na Hanjing, Tosanen Sampu Sunoge Song Long Sampu, the Obian Sek, Shilbak, that day. Nebuchadnezzar the Spirden, Deis Devuktener Ku Viran, Dro no Ting, Nin, Kovigi Batem Tortse for Kad Ko Ahwala, Derchalale and Uigo Gremedian Go On, Woodred Nova Kansak San, Rouge Go Kihuang. Mean, Makado, Pingyonjun Kelhayako Hakkukuku, Benin Ku Viran May, Wenkam Moho, Benchunkriktenai. That's how Sui Hopde Ki Bive on Kongting, Vida, Songlixu. The fact that Babylon became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world is a testament to its powerful influence on the imagination of later civilizations. This legacy is reflected in the grandeur of its cultural and political achievements. One of the most significant events in Babylonian society was the annual New Year's festival, Akatu. This 11-day celebration marked the peak of Babylonian religious and political life, blending both ritual and spectacle. During Act 2, the creation epic was recited, recounting Marduk's victory over primordial chaos and his establishment of cosmic order. The king's role in the festival was not merely ceremonial. He participated in a key ritual that symbolized the submission of his earthly power to the divine. As part of the drama, the high priest would strike the king's face, forcing him to bow before the gods in a powerful representation of divine supremacy over human rule. He ordered him to kneel before the statue of Marduk, a symbolic act of humiliation meant to show that even the most powerful earthly ruler was ultimately at the mercy of divine will. This ritual served as a stark reminder of the supremacy of the gods. Outside the capital, Nebuchadnezzar initiated sweeping infrastructure projects across his empire. Irrigation systems were expanded and repaired, significantly boosting agricultural output. This effort not only supported the economy, but also ensured the long-term sustainability of the region. Religious centers such as Ujur, and Sippar saw the restoration of their temples, reconnecting the people with their spiritual heritage. These efforts aimed to reaffirm the central role of religion in Mesopotamian life. To secure trade, military outposts and way stations were strategically placed along key routes, fostering economic growth. The result was a renaissance in both the economy and culture of Mesopotamia, healing the disruptions caused by the later Syrian period. Babylon. Nes, sa chunking nin soundu zake, kapila song limphobik tinwin kakogzetaga kumding the kebting kakito kwansa do fadring song soska ti tsu. Taranim pramfak bekan chungsek, bedidoga swekin tinwan. Dong Cheng, wen chuyo, la tunjo. Subdimu yuting sim, lin kwakadiam bava tinwan. Tuno se chingvigo mato hok song quatrin kirke. Dadanium mong cho tinvan hok kohok sana. Venavan hok gumfedrin mangi. Wikatreum hok chep setitu batungawan bun korsa. Don turesangtak ranin takpim. Ching song turikine. Shudisangta Babylon. The dedang hingsuk wu kumwana. Su kekup mijay kapyunstun korsa. The tarin und tonbo shinam hok raran verswekaitris shinan sen vatriktu vutru. Shinvan ban liksi gilai ga sundu boka viwa. Sonke katalodi hug de frekter trimjau kingfluk chanmon sonka lingvagik fair ublai hok. Denkitu. Ka kuso hanjing chi thebwere bezatran ver hestum king ter puktab. Kekub shade tayen dom manuet. Guan leva ga hog dom king gon sian. Kak tojek denter vatsungay kuyoso. Nindien chang nungya renwo ga zhong senzo kun ga hog yon sonya. Song vada. Ga javin tien pum tihan. Ka hogum kingdom. Ko pan kekmo vehestum kinte monwet. Ben hiljedo se duklibistitten. Sum ka lingbagik senzo vatraber hangra. Fortrin shinin gang hanukado searcho ka duamye swamye wafadrin onyetsong kwa ka chathantingyong. Shin Chechekwa Nebuchadnezzar van Amazomikshachada TCN. De fobe bin yud simdan sung de che hung mank tong cho vikonte pava. Suwang metopha kaptrutocha kokal nangwale sui kita seu udin so. Kiu ninwak no batul kwa de zabuklura. Kontraigu hua amalmaduk. Hasobara evil maraduk stronka nyur talabi kingsen. Trivium te jiannang suki bileto bonariglisa. Sin quan quindo za kehun vajading hongja. Soki nariglisa. Tridrivi shomanto jiannang. Kontrai trek. Go dan hantung bifetruk. Joang la quinrud shon vivwafer. Nabonidus, whose connection to the royal family remains uncertain, would become the last native ruler of independent Babylon. His reign marked the final years of the empire, during which he implemented policies that sparked growing internal opposition. A particularly unusual aspect of Nabonidus's rule was his devotion to Sin, the moon god. He elevated the status of this deity, an act that upset the powerful priests of Marduk, who had enjoyed supreme influence under previous kings. Even more controversially, Nabonidus spent 10 of his 17 years in the Arabian desert, far from Babylon. During his absence, he left his son Belshazzar to govern as regent in the city. This combination of religious reform and distant leadership set the stage for significant unrest in the empire. further weakening the foundations of Babylonian power. The reasons behind this extraordinary absence from the capital remain a subject of debate. Some suggest commercial interests, religious motivations, or health concerns may have played a role. Regardless of the cause, this unprecedented situation severely undermined central authority and alienated key segments of Babylonian society. The priests of Marduk, the aristocratic families, and the urban elites grew increasingly dissatisfied with what they perceived as religious deviations and neglect of traditional ceremonies. Their frustration with the neglect of these long-established practices deepened as the absence continued. At the same time, a new power was rising, just beyond the eastern borders of the empire. The Persians, led by Cyrus II, later known as Cyrus the Great, had been steadily consolidating their influence and military strength. The growing power of Persia would soon become a major challenge for the Babylonian Empire. With internal dissatisfaction brewing and external threats looming, the empire found itself at a crossroads. The combination of internal discord and external pressure would soon reshape the future of the region. Volkrongman Orkovetisidenatsen, the Luklur Batsi, T. Sen, Galuklur Batsi Tingardam Babalan, Sa Kedam Balikadinin, Kochoistong King Hin versus Supto Pashampo, Vadanchu Notings on Tolba Kelhik Duma Pen 3 Daniel. Musta Tektunga Vuiche began de se samne Gakaetur. Turana, Ganyod Shurudi Kohako Huk, Gabatsadon Turake Unkochofe, Dandaya Babylon de Darin Gatoha Makonsa Kankomangni. Osiris Tingwa Sampuvetsachakla Unje Gefo King Chon, Jukekonfa Unke Chingfu Tembo. Vosue Kusat Huntuan Sankoyan Iran. Cyrus Delicto Galyong Chua Median Soda. Latsara Umvongo Humak. Daila Mokwanchon Song Lixibatsi. Tevongo ni Kunjamagne Ve Kunsama. Zanobadil Veswe Kwandong Vatunchondo Ve Kanyam Von Ming Fair. Kacheo Ne. Febe Kawajun. So a hina tika Manushuja Zaganchoka Viva Shantram. Song Lixi. Choteswe Puktab Vadachem Gwakwatring Chimfur. The famous cylinder inscription, discovered by modern archaeologists, presents him as the one chosen by Marduk to restore rightful worship and just governance. This came after the alleged neglect of Nabonidus, whether due to divine will or political strategy. Through this relatively peaceful transition, Babylon's physical splendor was preserved, even though its political independence came to an end. The Neo-Babylonian Empire became a prosperous province within the larger Persian Empire. This marked the beginning of a new era, setting the stage for new paradigms in multicultural governance. Babylon's fall signified the end of an era, as its political autonomy was lost to the expanding Persian Empire. With the rise of Persia, Babylon's grandeur continued to shine, albeit as part of a larger imperial structure. Despite no longer being independent, it remained a significant administrative hub. Thus Babylon's influence persisted, but it was now under the shadow of a much larger empire. This transition marked the conclusion of the last truly independent chapter of Mesopotamian civilization. The fall of Babylon symbolized a new age, where empires of immense scale and diverse cultures began to shape the future of the ancient world. Trongzos Harantheki, Donosokai Tridit Kwakadeche Batse, Hisel Abapathia, Gapyunston Changtrid, Bundi Didem Huke, Tuina, Disen Gwatuki Fukun Neo Babylon Nen, Grinidin, Rukrane Winsong Tundai, Konji Kwaka Ditsi Kilhako Makosron Kuequina, Tuka Konchova Kuisun Luwong, Akatsemnian Pinsri, Chong Kingsen, Dengabunki Chaplik Sukwaka Hisel. Beniki Kwan Gwatheju Kodak. Then Suk Mak Busongwa Babylon Song Itukwa Venha Kendruk Wadenha Kshun Soskatinin. Nam Sinku 59 TCN. Dansugum Bakan Jakwan Jong Song Liksu Mesopotamia. Sabam Min Nen. Then also Kai Trugwa Gabandi. Sen Ken Winilan Kanthian the Bema. Sukin Ne, Moraun Chang Merchovum Datni. Kakwit Samrulet, the Senkuvigim Nid Hedon song to divisinetwante. Song kedio, Benjom. Kup bendune kon bada bingong sui tenpa balut. Me bingong and ko chungdiao quinrut. Ungat sang king sang. Shedin do way unigwe Babylon. Don't cho they the Vimbian tinta chinchudu quano. Hanawat quantron, song so desrai de walixina. Chingla Cyrus is tu wabatse. Sane gogola Cyrus is dead there. Movie wa konyon gotsur. Yuang kon mira hem chun anghuang lik si ton. Neng dopa. Sede chelam sapo gabutok bandu mosung sawum no de zagros. Pai nam kauyon Iran. Unoken kisa kwe kathelut makne. Da shelang dado to ping Cyrus. Gunho akemenid. Teyezduvak vanguk no. The trungsam la anshan. Lansa pe tak nam Iran. Chingsukir se kai tri kwa de che media. Sui trezer yabato Cyrus. Adakiong lita de che media. Vakong nam u. The usajia. Hilap Herodotus. Cyrus. The menuduan song se bimek. Salkiong udis mebogwa on. Wa media astiagi. The mokisa. Japlo kai pius swa jak tai kajgajwajwe. Makdu zakunin nurud le loba muedidana. Chang tai chek ben some sotwa prihim le pin 3. Lek do ong u as a chim le kalong togwa media. Vatodu didi king sin. Cyrus zachunamasum kumbenda kumin. Shinom chendis, samunet, chubit, trongvum, unseki. Onde kuso pose kuvigitea. Bosum vongogure colidia sa Anatolia. Kasum pulionov vembek Unanian. Vanu kuvigi fir ko kauyon Iran. Kasen tuo kun swe kwa onkyakam je shentuk sang to wa swe ling hok shenredit. Tuina, kolezi dakbin no budedi sadra Cyrus. Chingla ka ong doju ka dentok bi chinfu. Katwa ninteri samredit suda. Ningre aptath wana va tungel gumin shunki danap katrun stung di prum. Cyrus da fajeng on chingsak kathmerag doan dentok on chinfu. Cultural and religious tolerance were key elements in the Persian imperial strategy. The peoples under their rule were allowed to maintain their customs, local administrative systems, and religious practices. This approach ensured that loyalty and tribute flowed to the empire, while minimizing disruptions to local societies. As the Persian Empire expanded westward, it encountered the last Neo-Babylonian king, Nabonidus, who found himself politically and militarily isolated. Despite being a formidable ruler, Nabonidus had spent a decade in the Arabian oasis of Tama, for reasons that remain debated among historians. When he returned to Babylon, he discovered that his religious policies and governance were sharply criticized by influential groups within the society. This backlash left him vulnerable to external threats and internal dissent, further weakening his position. The Persian Empire's success in this context was rooted in their ability to integrate conquered peoples, while maintaining stability and avoiding unnecessary conflict. Their strategy contrasted sharply with Nabonidus's more divisive approach, ultimately leading to his downfall. His unwavering devotion to Sin, the moon god, had caused a rift with the powerful priesthood of Marduk, the traditional patron deity of Babylon. This tension grew as his neglect of essential religious festivals, especially the crucial New Year's celebration, raised concerns over the maintenance of cosmic order. At the same time, various conquered peoples within the Babylonian Empire were increasingly dissatisfied with restrictive policies, fostering resentment that created fertile ground for any invader offering a more tolerant governance. As the Persian forces advanced toward Babylon in 539 BC, they found a society deeply divided. This internal fragmentation weakened the city's ability to resist external threats, as the people were split between loyalty to their rulers and dissatisfaction with the current regime. Thus, by the time the Persian army approached Babylonian territory, the stage was set for a swift invasion, as the Persian promise of a more lenient rule attracted many within the empire's borders. Monsodon Krenbing, Kiu Kong Ku, Shonki, Nindon Feknahang Prung Dohang. Nabonidus Saphak Kunde Vedopo Vemuyudeda, Indrenshen Fritting, Mindiak Ninja De, Santon Balgia Sora. Devadan Relador the Sweet which was Soraces, Triduyad Wanteda the road, Vehimin Shentuk Suksek, Trino Dun Sung Ne Hatia Dun Euphrates, Cheta Koteking, Shokwenling Sam Never Babylon, Venangits Pulkat Pegard Le, Bien Neosinabonadus, Unvan Babylon Dun Tur.
Musta sui subdo qua sampu kunk. Wamam sashri tu. She Cyrus tan kunkwenda gua akadishin teet. Opus tan sang tigris. Kudin gua akadija du maida tan sao. Ningwejin huang mang. Kuni kun fenang. Volbayaga tase. Sipar bi hashim. Mekonko kwichin. Nabo nadas boche. Je shibsix. Agabaru. Stundugu guchium. Kumva krundui quis Cyrus. Timba Babylon. Mekongukfa suikanku. Sauda. Nabo nadas. Bibaje tab Babylon. Ki on durga. Mushtet ne. Wasre ejel mak. Wajel kasif shun. Mekong kujel trum. Tauren sue tong fen rutwen in ne. Koche noting strong sek Daniel working sen. Webante kunfinte vidin trud biran som tul kungding strong bitek wabel chaza shaw. Mangda yoto kirting. Tunan nogum ejel mak su sup do gwesunpo makonko drenching go no. Resistance. Cyrus himself arrived in Babylon shortly after its capture, and implemented policies that would shape Persian imperial governance for centuries to come. Rather than positioning himself as a foreign conqueror, he embraced traditional Babylonian royal titles, presenting himself as the legitimate successor to the ancient throne. He portrayed his rise as a divine mandate, chosen by Marduk to restore proper religious practices and to govern justly, in contrast to Nabonidus's alleged failures. The Cyrus cylinder, a clay barrel inscribed with the Persian version of these events, stands as one of history's earliest declarations of human rights. This artifact embodies the principles of religious tolerance and respect for the rights of conquered peoples. In this remarkable document, Cyrus details his peaceful entry into Babylon, expressing his deep concern for the city's well-being. Most importantly, he outlines his policy of allowing displaced peoples to return to their homelands and rebuild their religious institutions. This policy held particular significance for the Jewish community. The biblical books of Ezra and Chronicles record that Cyrus issued a decree specifically permitting the Jewish exiles in Babylon to return to Jerusalem. He even funded the rebuilding of their temple, with expenses covered by the royal treasury. Although only a portion of the exiles chose to return, this policy was groundbreaking, as it demonstrated Cyrus's commitment to religious freedom and his understanding of the importance of cultural and spiritual restoration for the people he governed. Cyrus bekoi la unge herfog had Georgidin som pinstum dute, wena printre, Isaiah udsepluaga, onla, damga, judjugdurgwa jo, la, Messiah, somnim conchoine, congila vewa makala unge dochervi pifien, sumen thing yang, dobe ching ching Babylon, coaching fubuke batsi, denza jaidianwa. Cum sum la shudo de guma dursan trungsam chili jai churchain. Tuna, Babylon wen shudo wei hui hong. Tem quan trong tum goesur sodon we kinte. Istung, hanjan, vakaprumstung vitlach or Babylon. Wen tet dude. Ya de furfa chunu crack of what de go bad. Cactus to kakwanjak that rab some lu Babylon. That thing pen in vitri song bomai hanjan mog what de. Krongbok sanda. Dukunkala shudo. Babylon wen duchi on vido quantrong song de hutra swe fadring duchi swe udin kodekok. The Persian Empire, founded by Cyrus and expanded through his victories, established a new model of imperial governance. This model was divided into provinces known as satrapies, each overseen by a satrap, a governor typically chosen from the Persian nobility. The structure balanced centralized control with local autonomy, allowing for a more adaptable and cohesive system. Central to the administration was a standardized approach. The empire adopted Aramaic as a common administrative language, issued uniform coinage, and built an extensive road network that connected distant regions. These innovations greatly facilitated governance, making it possible to manage a vast and diverse empire effectively. In terms of religious policy, the Persians followed Cyrus's original vision of tolerance. Local religions and cults were allowed to flourish without interference, ensuring that conquered peoples could maintain their cultural practices. Meanwhile, Persian rulers took part in traditional ceremonies, reinforcing their connection to the diverse cultures within their empire. The combination of these factors made the Persian Empire not only a political and military powerhouse,
but also a model of cultural and administrative integration that influenced future empires.
Kidanchan ga trung sem go re Babylon, go vivwa achimended, buming io da Zoroastrian, untunjo ko Iran, enema ko chenbutrum shmge sutur da sujado, tunan hokon apta tungo ni ben kadentuk bitrit. Diose kaitred kulga batsa, Mesopotamia desterquae un Turkey ulden kerde zos he setki, cinquing ulden da juksho kuvigine fedring magne for sensa nonye vasue thimium sornia. Sang no tosun un tumnim tiu quan trong isa trong de tibatsa.
Ken fruk ten van huk Babylon, galen guale hanjeng, baga prunstung van hago ho da hagwan soshet den ga pretien guade tribadsdi chungbada. Kunde badsu gum de hugho va abdung yu shentuk venium van minne. Su kekup mjeka neem winava histung guanle. Da jukcha de chibatsu drashanung kogup makne. Shazub se udin va fadriing raudai. Zonku. Protection and inclusion within an empire that spanned from the Indus to the Mediterranean opened up new opportunities for both merchants and officials. Despite the relative stability, occasional rebellions did arise, particularly during succession struggles within the Achaemenid dynasty. Babylon experienced two major uprisings, one during the troubled accession of Darius III in 522 BC, and another after the death of Xerxes in 4065 BC. These revolts were met with varying levels of severity, but they never reached the destructive scale of the Assyrian responses to rebellion. While these uprisings were significant, they did not result in the same widespread devastation seen in earlier empires. The Achaemenid rulers were more focused on maintaining control through strategic responses, rather than complete annihilation. The Achaemenid dynasty maintained dominion over Mesopotamia until 331 BC, marking the end of an era in ancient history.
Ki Alexander de Bembevua Bats Wokum, Darius III, the Hshingle de Ching Ming, on the Mobera Umbakna Quanchon, Songlikshi, Chen Sen Go on Conjudo Hellenistic Winrada Wumdat Kodam J Haidon Song, Makobada Unchang Ledai Ho Songlikshi Wumdatna. The Tunen, Ko Hadamakipun, Song Se Chun Dunay, Prixir de Sokrad Kashide Chir, Cyrus de Tinwa, Babylon, Vasilib Mohin de Che Davan Mamon, the Chibawong de Tara un Aquan Surin. Tay de Kabning the Chinchu Zungzos Hangning Nansa, Quachin Fair Recoge Batse, Denzo Se Kip to Hanton Querga Histong Chinju Duklib so Mesopotamia, Twina, Uncha Mia Mai, Noladam Ba Shose Ba Tonga Chinba Kajatir Vena, Chinchid Querka Nin Ven Ning Tsurda, Kong Lao Govazechi Batse, Dovenium Venha Mesopotamia La Verchod Some Chuyu, Banket Titsu. La kirka kapyunstong deep from, Levi pahu yejung, vechene the tara utrion. No trisu kodai kotidobaton vapyunde chokenium venmin mersaune. Dune de dambasua disanguvom de chindre hai kunsong setundai laude. Gay. Kaki se duk klipchung chudukuna da kunsum. Quok shinfifir godet sebatsva, none usapti shuchen. Dads or srebado kwe antaki o am. Dove nim wun min koda, shide hakon sunk, mugduve, kusum fu Mesopotamia, digbilla Babylon, un tetu tunta kwe lucheki, tram frikte, un sokutinku, sunkuvigine, un duchi swesum lindu, chadane. The Sinvenhaza were Mesopotamia, contribuaton quaka the Mesogopurnai tunenim vun min keke. Mango Nunjachir va triso kribal the quaka. Sujao 12 and Hanai da Kofantore unem tang sumchak chosofagian gakanem vun min tek. Du se duklib were Mesopotamia dakwadi. Den hekwas umguanalvan subme, song liksi ninra. Adeche batsi datomum vido quanchong, song de duichi va fadrian di senani. Votir ke hunda. Ninchun stung van hadaksak up left dring. Qua batini inti. De sequa quatring chin hadeth, dozen. Unasui kaitures quer datheluguambang. Tioki batsu. Kodai nan uichit septu dan septunion sekungian. Der doshuven in chunstung Mesopotamia, ungak tunjong sersha, kakvie voa nindo do quebatsu.
Tom Java Kanile Tungel Junstung Qua Babylon. Kasan Sampu, Duchi Kadend Ko Serva Keknap Katon Cloching Hadiprov, Vahestung Guanli Queho. Kenfuk Tinvan Babylon. Veniam Tang Kon Tomahawk Chingvi. Hagworms, Mangmead and Kak Woolikat, Shenkukene Congelam Fung Fu Shabatisho Gaga Bad Se, Makogayat Kat Se, Makoka Funding Hin Kwanien Go Wotu, Makahin Sum Tenan Gueho. Cultural continuity remained resilient during these 2 centuries, despite the loss of political independence. However, a more significant transformation began with the arrival of Alexander the Great, who defeated the Persian forces under Darius III. Following this triumph, the Macedonian conqueror entered Babylon in a spectacular fashion, receiving a warm and enthusiastic reception from its people, who were likely hopeful for relief from Persian rule. Alexander's arrival marked a turning point for the city. Alexander, recognizing Babylon's historical significance, planned to make it the capital of his newly established Eastern Empire. He embarked on ambitious restoration projects to rebuild its temples and palaces, demonstrating his deep appreciation for the city's cultural heritage. This shift in power signified not just a military conquest, but also a symbolic effort to revive and preserve Babylon's greatness, blending Macedonian and Babylonian influences in a new chapter of history. Tainor, Tarichet, Dungut Tutagwa Alexander Winan Sirusant, Susundane Wokum, Ladande J. Mesopotamia, Rivot Seleucus, Isangri Durche Seleucid. Unwango Grendo Sediver Ditrung Heid and Trung, they vi kai triver Babylon, Salises der Istvak Unschudomer, Salisaya Lundbin Song Tigris, Kak Songpu Babylon Sul Kang Kudeni Songpu Mani do Seget, Fonga Hai Lop, Vening Konpu do Shwiagan do Le, Gamahat, Fongsak Tezik Vagatungsam Hanja. Seleucia labiat stum guhona quatrudi, som dilis estuvacum sempuhindava penting, wakakumchen kintuk rehistum todja gulakangit vanim winning haul, sampunia conjurfana swe himyong kodece makalanin chongchani jatri wanhava sohiquatoda Seleucia, henya diumpukwe Seleucia, congelano jau swarm. Makalabuson quaswe kekabjane kanembana provamdon, va provamtai. The implantation of Hellenistic culture in the heart of the ancient land marked a significant shift in the region's identity. Many Babylonian residents gradually migrated to the newly established city, lured by economic prospects and tax incentives. This movement led to a gradual decline in the population and significance of the ancient capital. Under Seleucid rule, a complex cultural fusion began to emerge. Greek became the primary language of administration, while Greek architectural styles, artistic conventions, and religious practices were integrated across the region, reshaping the local landscape. At the same time, traditional Mesopotamian temples remained active, preserving their long-standing religious and cultural roles. Uniform writing continued to be used for religious and astronomical texts, maintaining a bridge to the region's ancient heritage. Amidst the growing influence of Greek culture, ancient literary works were still copied and studied in specialized scribal centers. This Greco-Mesopotamian synthesis is particularly evident in the intellectual developments of the period. Babylonian astronomical traditions, with their emphasis on the mathematical prediction of celestial movements, influenced Greek theoretical models of the cosmos. Simultaneously, Greek philosophical approaches impacted how Babylonian scholars interpreted their ancient traditions. Berossus, a Babylonian priest, composed a Greek-language history of his homeland for the Seleucid ruler Antiochus I, translating Mesopotamian traditions into a new cultural and intellectual context. Trontheokie Hellenistic, so Mesopotamia, Gusitrinbian Tungel denra ver, Göttingan Kopian Chung den or, Ventunda. Dem se hutrogomano dovachung dazing seng, so Turkiet soda downrido, Tayan ra sung bear duchiganile ton or tunstung. Dojung kunkungo you playing yuts, trangbu sang ne, Gavi shirin, hiai lap dokia, the donava kavi shirin Mesopotamia, Vizu, Zeus, the doni seven Marduk, Apollo the Nabu, the Artemis, the Istar, Tarani Morfruk, Pogum fatrum schnegatingang fek now. They não pan song sua fedren tundio mui, nurka yoto vena vashinin tua hatrum venau. Domtia, the fongtra tungo mergom sujen. Bao chung go fi bi ran from don. Gatreum fi triet hug tungo shin chin. Shin traulune, tuot sui chui bunigo ji nurka shampus simwit. Noa sui dada winha wa tungo goteyim raret. Kaktung merne konje angwand and desam chin shiren quagojin meskan taktung sushagdan sohu, avwana. Tani tranda set vedif teen wasu tinke chenli song seji, Hellenistic. Volbuji jijo the grid. Quin sot sim tridu lan no trinjo. Kidetsi suyo dunim sung do nobu, vaga aplug, verbin ma. Shingwe Parthian udintok Iran den vertung a. Dezendev moren va patak. Sachin gil shoten kwa wanguk selucid, vuxum, sugavukum sachin di Mesopotamia, so usim, ko denzo jaidra, mersum quatring chimbian kwa kuvuki, tioki Parthian dadsim. Cho sue tralifanova kamohin wenha perfundong, so Turkey Hellenistic, madutini hilup wenja vido quanchong, song hanching wavan. Nen Aramaic the den sitin uteho. Kakio tuun habatse. Jakan ret hard trong a Turk that sit down hong. Nukre Parthia frikium. Perform fluk kaitri. Funkri. Shopub kachenkring dit fon. Kokrin tuchot ket. Basung kahudon sampup yoki high lap. Bakakwan li den toy prunstu. Trong gai dredine. Babylon tito sui ten chad. Madu vensko jinku sing song. Vaduichi. Unso yu tum yo. Den debika tungsam doshu, mufadrem vu, Seleucia bing ba song degrees, Vadriman nebra sampu cham kukuwigi, Bakatizafumzo padbing kia song, Lo shan richugana shanging jo thi, Orug, Inmu tumne sampu kod istaku Mesopotamia, Ven buitudu wasaksum apigo, Chungmin sukmak benzum kuimujisim lixil dai. With its main temple complex, dedicated to Ishtar. The site remained active well into the Parthian period. Culturally, the Parthian era witnessed the final phases of cuneiform writing, which had served as the primary script of Mesopotamia for over 3,000 years. The most recent known cuneiform astronomical text dates to AD 75, while the latest precisely dated literary text is from 35. This gradual decline of the ancient writing system marked a significant break in cultural continuity. Despite this shift, many Mesopotamian traditions endured, albeit in translated forms or passed down through oral transmission. Religious developments during this period also played a key role in the spread of new beliefs and practices. Lixir ko kabdon dutek, so Mesopotamia. Dukbyadla, so ka sampu go, chunking sifadjeng makne, kongdon dutek Babylon, konyon gukli venugwe, vensolai so, chikoswe choper, kodre batsli, le drafulidusumai, ho dan, drunen, ko aukwang go song sitham tongyo kodra dute. Voturabin, nin, yotu ho prin kwakesone siderson, Talmud Babylon, Zahingshan, dela umbusutrab doso kakwitolron kwakarabi, verlukle, badadud kwagadote. Shin kwitolron nedam vido quandron song suifedrin tongyo vema kwakabdon dote, so Babylon. Chuan ti quandron. Chik bro, trong lixura kasura. Akagre batas asanin letbe gapilsu kai trikwe Parthian vanan yishubek sasa kumyun. Sibibon chedu kai trik trungrang. Mak ne wa pirjorhat. Sutramine danda gaigren. Trong de tunko krin rujkwe batal. Chaku. Diorse kai tri watriudai. Sasanyan. Vanan ibek sad in the weather nuensa rishibudzi sao. Kongyon tavom Mesopotamia. Zoroastrianism. Darango se hutra makne vachinkwik. Du na. Toki dada aplud dowe kakabdon tungyovhe. Histin hanchom, turimfanka. Yoshem ha. Vini yokra te ko jatong ve yin veladong de ap. Katazifan. Hudomo edongwa der che. Sasanyan. Dadadem jibkal re. Anchong ni samprovida iset segiva turki ne. Kongili in hento ago huno. Vesangyo vom kongru. Dedrasano ki quan tintu gwa aquan suri. Daga prumsum siag de vakujo strong usit chi sada. Kak sun fu fe, so Mesopotamia ven tetu hodum. Madu tonsipe sui monu had, sovaka Turkey etsilada. Senkwan venovasrunga seki wogo Mesopotamia tsuki hugo sujim vukundadze. In gang mandians du Turkey. Tin gang. Tanchia revs. Duketa guahos o rum dram la sanam. Gena dran jo man aken, fedren. Tin gang. Kitos ok pasea ton hinshun katrung sam quentrung. Wego hu puffendom tum binim guibrao golan historian. The fadrin in pinsum shinin hot taxe, mang lev hungo qua hoep sipanchi da landen tur trunkwa. Tronkuda, gago five tetu duchi afwan ko main, sung kuvik, turing petrantum go fungfu, adada, kakabdom hugzedo take the Mesopotamia da senzuk Talmud Babylon. Honshen volkaunan wabak sa kong yun. La dresham bo binsum fakli vadata ko agua nisa stong do tego grabini. Thung lusta. Tanin ein den mekan suitan, in state vukum, van duchika pjunstong tonga Mesopotamia ko sade, titu nim friahan, nekan kole guaho, sholiodio ting do gendas and el ten thehe, hunken tungog dadena, laumal roedan, teba ke kerchik singfokwaja rap holgo to. Kademberger rukled Sassanian stromdrenchen vkirping. Soke disia van uxepsem Luke, Prindo Arab, de Quincusa de Mesopotamia, Viancuvigne Santung Sam Kodeche Hugo. Vanan substitious dew, Kadeche Abbasid de Bashilid, Baghdad de Drushan Trungsam de Gumar, Sang Pune do Yasi de Vicchika Samshik kilometers Urbanitenchik Washinpuko Katizafon, Te tu Pilstong says the Vikashudo Margani Ditsi Kwakatini, Diosekai Trigo Huishud, Kubigina. Yade, Reitan, Hilveringarak, Som Timbatsa, Kuimla Vomdatha, Dachunkim se Fuhunwenwa, Tunem, Modem Rasum Chinsum Hantom Febivakanium Wenwatsuda, Kakvi, Sinor Ko da Guasuma, Baakad, Zagareji B. Lankuga, Sonkitrudhinem, Kuni Sum Kumkumsum de Shujungne, Chuniyin Zigurat, Vaden tu de Supdo, Uragataya Segduvachunka Sendung Hugyo. Dierber Makupuni de Shuren, Nin Yota Lendo ver Turkey Tsil when Amtumt, Ching Chungiling Vida, Nin Trioda, Pung Mak, Tui Kosebiende Makme, In Raconte Shua Moan in Disen da An Servo Wanfa, At Sohu qua Han Miniman. Genfrug ten von Huck wa on Huck, Fadrins os Hang Tinini Ki ta Mesopotamia. The ko aquan so sec den qua huck holgo som nesecido, sin timbo son ka kituk tuot chel, that nova tursuna, tetu duichi va fadrin nim nomnia son zos hang givana, kak fik tien hanjun la katsadam zegu, gupion qua kadze chi wong te, za kupran, hin shen heston guan chi kwa kakugyoja, shen yen line, congelad zuvib kwa kua, makala nim tang choka hing suk tochok so sanai. Vorso, East Indian, Jean, Nemoti Buen Huck, Vagafonguda, Vanatsetu do Duiti, Madu Oso, Natani Hingsuk de Lebiento, Magdu Jung Geko Sadakajum Kojo Bilanka, Den Hakwan Gojum, Len Hingu Akede, Kwakathehe. Via Medi Nin Net Tatun, Kwanian, Wen Ha Lang Ha, La Quatsering Contesactin, Chingsek Tirbin, Jungan, Unkam Sumshamve Rum Drum La. Nim wen mindak segbada ver iridu a uruk, batinin ki 30 sen, dem devon dem wad qua na, hakum wu en dung shen fe, len udun se fadri wen hammer, kakia tuga disen lang ha wen tetu tunda sonka kabdundo te, son kingfruk tenwen huk, sonka promfrak tuse, a son voan anhuan kon rored doeka, nin wen min kit, kakwikikwe Badava theki idabu. The Devin, the sanctuary man gup caragwanim wenine, mora lu you cam pamo, ver aguam yaudaigue lang hadova thegi kodai. Ancient Mesopotamia, once lost to time, has had its forgotten grandeur revealed. The deciphering of cuneiform writing unlocked a vast trove of knowledge about this early civilization. Excavations unearthed monumental ziggurats in royal palaces, buried beneath centuries of accumulated soil, bringing to life the splendor of a bygone era. This recognition of Mesopotamia's contributions, its pioneering legal codes, the world's first cities, and earliest writing systems, has reshaped our understanding of human history. It was here that many of the building blocks of modern civilization were laid. Today, the enduring legacy of ancient Mesopotamia continues to shape the world. Its physical remnants can be found in archaeological sites scattered across modern Iraq and Syria, while its influence lives on in the cultural and genetic heritage of the region's people. The legacy of Mesopotamia, deeply embedded in the landscape and the lives of contemporary inhabitants, stands as a testament to humanity's shared origins and the incredible achievements of this ancient civilization. Perhaps the most profound legacy of ancient Mesopotamia lies in the foundational concepts that shaped subsequent civilizations. These early innovations in urban organization, writing for record-keeping and literature, the codification of laws, the practice of mathematics and astronomy, and the development of complex religious systems seeking to explain humanity's place in the cosmos, have had lasting impacts across history. The story of ancient Mesopotamia doesn't conclude with a dramatic end, but rather with a gradual transformation and the diffusion of its influence. Over time, the culture evolved, seamlessly passing its wisdom to future generations and societies, ensuring its continued relevance. This transition, from direct cultural continuity to an indirect legacy, marks the enduring impact of Mesopotamian civilization. The influence of its ideas, technologies, and philosophies continued to shape the development of other cultures long after the civilization itself had changed. Ultimately, ancient Mesopotamia's contributions can still be felt today, woven into the fabric of modern societies, from urban planning to legal systems, scientific exploration, to the understanding of our place in the universe. The pattern we observe reflects the fundamental nature of human civilization itself. It is not a series of distinct chapters with clear beginnings and endings. Instead, it is an ongoing flow of influence and adaptation, where each generation builds upon, modifies, and sometimes rediscovers the achievements of those who came before. This continuity forms the very essence of our shared history. As we conclude our exploration of Mesopotamia's long and rich history, we are invited to step back and reflect on the extraordinary legacy this civilization left behind. The remarkable innovations and ideas that arose from the land between the rivers continue to shape the course of human development in profound ways. Even today, the contributions of Mesopotamia can be seen in both obvious and subtle forms, many of which remain essential to our daily lives. These influences, sometimes recognized and at other times hidden, are woven into the fabric of modern civilization, a testament to the enduring power of this ancient culture. The legacy of Mesopotamia stands as a reminder of how human progress is not linear, but cyclical, an ongoing process where past achievements guide and inspire the future, creating a continuous thread of shared knowledge and discovery. Viet, kalezi lakonge kak marak nista, song liksi luegri, lenda pen do teyeman kako hestum kwanin kuye domjen vahing de som dat set kwat uruk, wok, bindo. Nojila promfak prikte, leg chep sumprem nongye wajaudis tormia, then dezen dev, hestom nedef edring songum kunku lingho, kokelen den dad nen sweething vrusom, bauton gatakprem wenhok, so antaludo fagapionte trisulik, quatehe. Histum chud wit doni sad lufadrian da Mesopotamia, da angfun stan, ogur pionkanik shikure you chud wisane, bachinkainian verjaute. Wine da lanrad ratenim tang chosefadrian winning. Tunyon ge kubandane ge sohulue grade do bien do son twa. Ve tutsu ge kubdon do shi, we luglu tuladon shamum ha, kasu hatan do shiwa ge histum fansek sohu. Faktat, da him sum veni sumputhat. Daila noaning lobada doma veni one day one satuntai chudane. With a menedicatory ga quinta don duk, guanli tayun chung, de chung ga hog don king te, ma dui tri tsuk so hum je ga liu hik. Him je akle fak vetrien strong in trung sam do shipen fong ni, baga hudon sampo dun gabulok. Vite, a histong twig dun ka tojak tongyo, runin tru kota so hui, that are any mohin kaban. In mohin ne conjure dum vido quenchon song turkey do kwa so hui doshi. Makala nim tang the tito dejin with either quavosho theke sani. Hingie sununai. Konje akwanda. Kafruk, when hanhoga sunfu makalan ran, mirande tuki takania darbikias. Tuada. Kahinfuk wanli vatuk saksoku. Dokatin lindu. Apion nukra lagen kau go kagagadon fajing. Kungviswe timbo kwa hahaka kunga. Kasampo dadrasano, hutu kwa kayotobama. Asangta. Tujaswe fadrin. Kungan su kwa shohu. Shing mo hing wanli vatojugne titugo yengdung. Kaiting wasikni when it takshuk mo songsik. Taksakusa ne da fadrin yovanim tang kinfluk. Koahak. Tuan hagwa tinwan hak. Bandau do tu w krad 50. Do that dai lukki hall. King tur kwa fadrin leak. That den intrindo tinvi sunka punstong hukta kwa Mesopotamia. Hesting dem koso shuksik. Fedringdo kamakwan li suma. Darasan umpan kontasha de dolyong turjan ra hinakgog akwam da pride so da kayo abdonka don vinai. Kaya son kiermso. Wuzaki chunta nove shuksike. Song fun. Hey sibshik shingreja kwansaka visa. Vaka nim din toa kadai. Sage ham ning na. Hinye kwansat ne. Punjis subfram verswe fadrin kokaliso kog. Makao hagwanzan kachunta tunghin segi wa tochuka hodon hang ne. Kakanya sim fakle. Koban chon sohui. Ko trick to dadotayim rosham from gabolot go Mesopotamia va zratsota. To onamudan hamurabi. Nimbulut tuna de silipkayensa kongli. Quitsum. Eve turnka pteta jaudisormia agapazenfa balve sokatran club sohufana. Mukatayubud saja. Taja. Tandai. Nimbuluk navan datsim so umbuktin chan mabra. Kainesian sue luk frey. Vaga kunkai. Abjung. Uncha isa quen va fashufa ver undezi da wuragraswe de ista. Tuabunakai chur. Grenta galuk fed do silliv zumchat. Levikwe le dogdo la nem tang to se fadrin gwa histong fupli sonai. Kak histong fakli. Himda. Vilken aghuan sok sek finung sok. Tun galvasilan tua. Fadrin so Mesopotamia. No da dinghin sitam. Sinung hok. Songsos kubeki tuongdong. Vasak. Kalchao. Pudren da hunchu. Song city Gilgamesh. Konimben tongdong rorekt. Vakakonchao song king sane. Satka kai mun. Wakongli shinun sin. Trick tu wutru. Doliv holot. Amwe kwani. Shibzelo agree vaka lukki lukat shinan. Dadotayim ro song govern bantungyo Mesopotamia. Shin tidam ne da titul anghuan sagundan kapun song tungyo sane. Binjagi haka kiakad song frekan. Tungyo. The histong kabad kwa kalimo. Nifuktan te. Chodan kintruk sandiung the sweet sitting ho. Bail mangda inakwa van ha Mesopotamia. Sheng hakwaz nai da tondadila dai da titul van vo. Kwakanim van ming sa ne. Hebniakwas. Got a tree and the. Nyoga sa Mesopotamia. Gas sanking kunga Worm dup kodana. Taben de kuisum hang ne. Amora ning kalen kinte mo. Kisten, Chudsi, Dunandrinongden Suma. Fadren, Daju Nongye Fadren, Mak Sak. Naju Nongye Fadren, Mak Ne Gai Sa Songnen Kubik. Banko Him, Lam Tang Danket Sang Luden Fripan. Bensegum, Dekerme Kora, Nunga Sensegum. Nim Tibus from Lukin Verka Kunko Dong Dong Jan Za Fadring. Sangkao Kim Dong Techimli, Kak Pesantuen, Kobansa. Termomeran Kalenjautum. Senzo 13. That wave of also no confer comes at going in bubtizamke. Kadu tinchimne zang huang dan and naming sane. Son yuludi. Ke todjug. Chinche. The gersen bang should occur their cheerleon to. The bada hingsen, va dream snay song Tigris, va Euphrates. Heng gen. Sentence mitsiag. Kring tuchid deep reform. The kring lu trungrang. Mishide ke fongu term stone le yekwa wali. Mishide ke then for that day wachinkweng stone nisa. Tita de lani wande ke ban makamakai chid Mesopotamia fadoma. Zin should nize vachin chiduku ho vasagun de Nebuchadnezzar. Conjusenkung masa gedbe. Then takavi le lani mohing labai ho kri jachuka the sao. Các sông như dạy song như trọc khai trền na. Đô có sân cùng hay con. Đã cháu ra nên tin lệ. Sủ tinh hình trạc sự quản lý và tổ chức xã hội. Dân sân cùng và xếp bẻ. Song quản lý mòn rịp quê hậu. Đã hạ quan đã cả niên văn minh xã na. Is the vật hình điểm tang cho cả hình sụp tổ chức chương trẻ xã na. Qua yo gian. Non chất nên dạy yo. Chương trình này đã cấp hẳn con nấu và dễ phát triển cả mô hình quản lý mòn vật. Cấp hẳn hình sản phẩm gà dễ chế và chương thể view đại stong lịch sử nín lợ. Giàn dị ấy, đâu là cả hệ stong chương trình. Sau này là yếu tố quan trọng, xong cả niềm quen mình có đã. Các chương sức văn học ra ra đi, để campaign khảo phá carbon của con rì. Qua đa phần hà niềm quen để viên su sung đề xong. One trayon ha Epic of Gilgamesh. Đâu để mà khát chạc. Ting bao à cột ting kê Eugene strong on seju contest rock cơ so khát chạc. Chương chủ đề này con chú đơn sren là nên khát show. Mà có lên bài học sở sực và sử dụng và khát chạc. Văn học truy đuổi mang lên xuống gam và khung lệ và đô cổ. Có thể phê rõ ăn của dùng của nó xuống nên thắc quên sau này rồi con sạc Job, xong kinh sân. Xong thắc quên này, là đàn em câu yo và Chopin và thư tin của con rể. Histung ga hiện tỏa sang thở đã đi sơ và để campa vitri của con rể xong trích tù vũ trụ. Bên cạnh đó, thu tin yo ga bài sân ca hong gia, ga bộ su chập tu nhu, bên em con trẻ sao hòa đều đồ dì lại xong ga vân bần stung nies. Mô ra gặp yun stung vân hở và thuộc các xếp sôs. Su an hoàn của Mesopotamia đâu bởi vân hành lờ đã mô ra kiên mơ, tác động sơ rần đến gần ninh sau này, có thể nở. Mesopotamia chân là minh chân rơ rạ tì xe, cho khả năng chỉ lưu nhì sân tu à mà, của loài gầy, đó là khả năng nhé dệt vật chân nên phân mình của cơ thể sửa. Lưu dơ và phiên đạt trí sầu cùng cái khả năng khất mì và nên này vừa hoàn thành. Muốn strong miễn sản của sang tu quan trọng Mesopotamia. De la cheng la de tsoran in te che vo tu jan. Tun da la dai hal tu tu go pe ka. Dai la yu tu kut loi. Song sue fadrien go nim wim. Chofer loi gre zedzueng som vinin gre di tso. Yes du vok va dui chin in senque da qua ka thie. Tun niam tang ni. Kalin kihan. Va fadrien wenha. Taga prihim. Unkak benzum. Tumtos chamdai liksi. Mesopotamia. Tara on sue lindu wena, smideka don songo, diona za jugniam wen ming ni duchi, sukma kwalu seki, va hakuen gono da landran to kaniam wen hafek. Kijum tanyan rangwen yan wana. Confession ran sue put tab, son quatsoin land so of Adrian, this jay is the dozmere. Shina kwane konji donjan la sue kishan, that goes with set su, kelting. Và sang thầu lệ phù hợp với những hệ thị của thế chế. Và ở van Mesopotamia, câu anh của sự cơ dân đến đưa dơ soku sana. Those qua sự phim bà vân và phát drain song. Muốn sự sang thầu của Mesopotamia đã trực tiếp à quan đăng cơ niệm bân minh sana. Như và sự thiết sốc và để caption cơ chuột địch. Trong khi đó, niệm phở ninh phở cơ trở lại ninh nghiệp và đúc liệp đồ bên ninh sụp tạc trong của ninh lỡ. Và sự trong đồn thêm cơ vấn đề phổ biến này vì sự an quan trực tiếp. Trong lưu yêu trion học. Gặp phri khăn của Mesopotamia đã đem vào cất sâu hữu sau này. Trong qua lưu yêu trôn jan. Gặp chuyên qua lưu yêu bần dish wana qua cất. Quan hệ xâm đại Mesopotamia cổ đại và cất sâu hữu đòn đạt. Giống như con sông gầu và vô xung thể hàn. Và chiều phản hàn. Một ghé hàn đề mang đại en dring. Đến vẫn chung đồn sen wana. Muốn sự kiểu đưa tìa. Các mơ xuân thể. Xong khi níu tiều phè. Lai ai fan tak, the tai hug. Tông qua karma mất levy fucked up. Một sự thiểu duong i biên mez than our long debt. Cho the tai sushian, son y vetri conkigot. Hit me down no banda tula. So cudon beyond gue hai con song Tigris, the Euphrates. The rare hoa huyen the vosho dome, so wave hair. Then chung ven la ompren gue dong shen vu dai gwenim wen ming and ill tetu tunda choden nay. La ninkudin hinda yu gwa unain feji godin in bedokarin song chin kituk so at timing wu true. Chungta edan koin is sandu kosa den la hood, or become sandu in kwan. Yet the fundamental challenges of human existence, creating sustainable food systems, establishing just societies, understanding our place in the cosmos, expressing our hopes and fears, and contemplating our mortality, remain as pressing today as they were for the inhabitants of Uruk or Babylon. The story of Mesopotamia reminds us that civilization is not a possession, but a process, not an achievement, but an ongoing project. It began long before any of us were born, and will continue long after we have returned to dust. We are inheritors of traditions, innovations, and wisdom accumulated over millennia. The story of ancient Mesopotamia stretches back thousands of years, its roots embedded deep within the first farming communities who settled along the great rivers. These early pioneers set in motion humanity's grand experiment of building something greater and more enduring than the fleeting lives of individuals. As we reach the end of our exploration into the history of Mesopotamia, we gain a profound appreciation for how our distant ancestors, despite the vast span of time between us, faced challenges that still resonate with our modern experiences. Their struggles, whether in moments of triumph or failure, hold echoes of our own lives. In their stories of wisdom and folly, courage and cruelty, we find reflections of ourselves. These ancient peoples, with all their flaws and strength, remind us that the core of humanity remains unchanged through the ages. Though the specific forms of civilization may evolve dramatically over millennia, the essence of human life persists. Thus, the journey through Mesopotamian history not only illuminates the past, but also serves as a mirror, allowing us to glimpse the timeless nature of human existence. Henyu Cernizame Kobundwa Kongre Ratin, Yo Wazosor, Sui Chanan, La Sui Aping, Sangto a Hudiet, Wen She Yuan Tin Yuan Su, Disan Wen Yun Wen Ming Lang Ha, Wen Tun Dai Chong Pen Fun Ye, Chong Im Vobi, Chonka Sumpuva Hestum Foklut, Chonka Kainim Tungyo a Kneke Ha, No Hin Sen Shong Nulu, Kongen Sen. Kachungta, that Dinke Yu Yi, at Saravwendet, Songum Seju, Jongren in Tranlum Apigo Kukom Song Koda, Loi How They, La Shukta Kongensum.